Town of Essex Selectboard meeting on Monday, July 12th, 2021 to order. First order of business, are there any agenda additions or changes?
The only thing that Evan just realized is that we have forgot to do the Pledge of Allegiance again, as was our practice before return, back when we were remote. Oh. Okay, let me see if I can. That's the only change from staff.
So, okay, so,
Whoever CA it has no sound.
Kathy.
Yeah, so
turn the lights down.
So are we doing the slide? Is that what we're doing?
So there's, I guess, that's
It just takes me.
we previously used to, and I don't know whether it was removed when we were remote.
Yeah.
And we have not put it back on, and I wasn't sure whether that was an equity question. Left it off, because not everyone might be a citizen, I don't know, but we haven't had that discussion, so I suppose we should. No, anybody have comments? We put it back on the agenda?
Pretty sure it's part of the U.S. government that we put it on there pretty easily.
All right. So we can make that agenda change when we get there. And that's the only thing from staff?
Yes.
Okay, any changes from board members?
Mr. Chairman, I need to pull the minutes of June 21st to correct one of the lines.
Okay, so we will move the minutes that are item 6A to before the 5G, the executive session.
Your voices aren't picking up on the microphone.
The microphone is for the television, it's not for the room, so I will try to speak louder, yeah.
We need an
Yeah, my apologies there, I got spoiled by having a microphone right next to my face in my son's bedroom for these meetings, so I'll try to project. Thank you for pointing that out. Any other agenda changes from board members? Okay, so we have two changes. One is to add the Pledge of Allegiance back into the agenda and for future agendas, please. And also to move the minutes into the business section of the meeting. Motion to make those, approve the agenda with those changes.
Move to approve the agenda with those changes.
Thank you, Tracy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and now I'd like to invite you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
we seem to be having some trouble with people on Teams who can't hear. If we could just take a moment to see if that can get figured out. And for people at home on Teams, if you could just type into the chat, if you can hear us or can't hear us, just let us know one way or the other. Well, I guess if you can't hear us, that's not going to help.
So do you want me to continue talking randomly, or is that?
Yeah, we can just talk randomly to see if anybody wants to say anything. I can type into the chat too.
So I
I'm hearing
I just got
people are
back from
saying-
vacation. I was in Washington State, actually at the same time as Betsy Dunn. She was in one national park. I was in a different one.
they can hear us.
They can hear us now? Okay.
All right.
All right, I didn't get to that much story. It involved bologna sandwiches because all the restaurants were closed because it was so hot.
Well, if we get done before 10, you can.
Yeah. Okay, all right, back to the agenda. Okay, so we've modified the agenda. Next item on the agenda is public to be heard. This is a time for the public to address the board on any topic that's not on the agenda. during public to be heard, please only expect to speak once. If you have multiple items you want to touch on, please include them in your initial conversation. Please keep your comments civil. This is a time that is intended for comments made to the board, so please don't criticize each other if you can avoid it, or please don't. What else do I need to say here?
They're gonna need to come up to the mic and
Right, you're
sit.
gonna need to come up to the microphone so people at home can hear you if you'd like to speak. We will in the future have a microphone stand because it's gonna be a little, I think at this point you'd have to sit in a chair in order to be close enough to the microphone for your voice to be picked up. So, is there anyone who would like to speak during public to be heard? I see 2 hands online and I see multiple hands in the room. So now I'm trying to figure out whether, okay, almost everybody wants to speak. Okay. So what I will do is go ahead and start with the folks that are online and then move to those in the room. So Andy Champagne, I see your hand.
We hear what sounds like a set up chipmunk type sound.
Oh, Andy, we can't hear you.
How about now?
That's,
Yes.
That's better.
Pop Guild.
yeah, a lot better.
Okay. So yeah, last month we were talking about. I got the impression that last month the board seems to have problems getting like input from the community. Is that a good assumption? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I was at the end of the meeting, you had one of the committee people up here and they seem to be having trouble getting input from the community. And I was just curious if does the board and committees have trouble getting input from the community? Is that kind of a good estimation of what's going on? Does the board have trouble getting input from the community?
Generally, people are not bashful of reaching out to me. I get plenty of emails and phone calls from folks. People do come to meetings and speak. I don't know. I'm not sure what the source of your comments concern.
Okay. Well, from my perspective, I'd like to talk about that for a minute. One of the things that I find these meetings very rage-inducing. I do not like coming to these meetings. They are not fun to attend. I do not enjoy, it's hard to get in front of a room like this in a formal setting and try to speak truth to power. And you guys are really not that accommodating to that. If you speak out of turn, you get shut down. If I show up late, I can't talk later. It's not fun and it's not an open thing. And if you shut me down, I don't want to come back here. And for somebody who's just coming to these meetings, a regular person, to think that they would come to these meetings and get shut down, you think they're going to come back? They're not going to come back. So yeah, another thing that I've heard people do is, the board does roll their eyes and they're not fully attentive. They're not fully attentive to the person talking. I've heard that, and that's annoying to people, including me. There's another person told me that I should format the way I talk and I should use bullet points. And so I got to ask you a question. Do you work for me or do I work for you?
So you're asking me a question. I've been the board is elected by the voters.
Okay, so you work for me, is that correct? You work for the voters.
Well,
Not directly.
This is a volunteer position, but it's my responsibility to represent the interests of the town and the people who live in it.
Okay. Okay. Another thing I've noticed is that you have a bunch of committees, like a tree committee, a sewer committee, and there's no committee for like public relations or community outreach or anything like that. Has the board ever thought of creating one?
A number of years ago, there was a full-day workshop about public engagement. It's been discussed in the past. We don't currently, you're right, have a.
So why do you have a tree committee? So the trees in the town are more important than public relations. Is that
I don't think the town has a tree committee. The village, I believe, does, but I don't think the town has one. Just a clarification there.
okay? Is there a sewer committee?
And so
We have a open space committee that also deals with trees.
Yes.
yeah, in our conservation, we have a conservation committee that certainly has some input into the trees in town.
Okay. So are you saying that the trees are more important than getting input from the town, from people in town, or is that
So
just
I'm
kind of
I'm not saying that at all, Andy. We have these select board meetings. We're required to have at least one a month. We try to be open. I've been trying to allow people to speak. This type of back and forth conversation we're having right now, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for from some people because that's not the intent of this part of the meeting. I think I'm trying to do my best, Andy.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. Another question is, if you want to get better, I'd find that these meetings would be a lot more beneficial and easier to go to if you provided food. One of the things when I lived in San Diego, one of the best groups that I went to was a .NET group, and we had food every time, and it was my one day of the week to get food, to get pizza. And we'd sit around and just talk about tech stuff. It was a lot of fun. And I think that would take a lot of the frustrations that people get and that I get when I come to these meetings.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah. One last thing. Another question is like you don't seem to ask about like past. You don't seem to like pester like past select board members or state reps or past state reps. I mean, there's a lot of intelligence. There's a lot of people who've been around town and they have a lot of experience. And it's just like you don't really want their input. You don't ask for their input. Kevin S runs the Essex Poly Talk every weekend. If I was you, I wouldn't dare let him out of the room because he's getting a group of people together every weekend and they're talking about politics in Essex Junction. So if you wanted input from people in your community, you could, these people are the ones who have the knowledge. And all the people who show up at these meetings, they're your best people to really query because they're the ones who are taking the time to come to these meetings. Most people, they're busy. These meetings are very boring. They're very mundane. Who wants to talk about sewage and trees and things like that? Who cares? So I mean, and these people have, they're all, they're basically what I would call political nerds. So they're talking amongst all their friends, and they're talking about, they're not just talking about, about the board. They're talking to a bunch of other people, and that's where you're going to get a lot of your input. So that way when you go up and try to do merger, it doesn't lose by 56 votes. When you try to get elected again, you don't lose by 2 votes. You can get, if you query these people, they're going to tell you. You got to ask them stuff. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Okay, Ethan Lawrence.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect.
I see you too.
Yeah, it's been a while. I've been a little bit busy catching up on the farm this spring. Spring, it's really summer, right? No, I was just curious to know if there's any progress. I know I see the traffic counter back up again after another neighbor made a complaint. But I was just curious to know a little background on what's going on Osgood Hill Road. I don't know if Evan had anything on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a little technical difficulty with it. It's back up. We try to get at least 2 to 3 weeks of data, so we should have a answer from the police department on their speed study in a couple weeks.
And part of the delay was due to when the stormwater improvements were put in for the swales along Osgood Hill Road. That delayed the count a little bit too, because Public Works and police are looking for the count based on traffic flow and
Mhm.
not having the construction going on.
Right.
A few weeks.
Has anybody made their way up here to see that project per se on Osgood Hill? The construction project that it'd be a good ride for somebody that let's say a perfectionist or anybody that can draw a straight line on a coloring book, but they've dug into the road pretty good in certain spots, and the one area that got washed out in October, there was no repair made to whatsoever other than the initial emergency repair, and I was under the impression that the money that we received was to make those repairs. So I don't know. I've been out of the loop. I don't know if there was a meeting on the money allocation as far as the FEMA money.
We'll look into it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Look into it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll get a hold of the police chief too. But if you talk to him before I do, let them know if they sit on the corner at Hanley Lane, they'll catch people. Down at the bottom of the road isn't the best spot to find somebody when they can see you half a mile away. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ethan. Okay, Lorraine.
Hi, thank you, Andy. Quick question. The City Protect link is broken on our website, on the town website for police information. I was wondering if someone could get back to us on that. What's going on with it? I don't know if anyone knew that. The crime data link. We were using City Protect, and it looks like it's been broken since April. Can someone look into that and see why it's broken and get it fixed, or let us know what we're going to do about it?
Sure.
Thanks.
I might be able to provide some clarification. Lorraine, it might be because I think April was the turnover for when the police started using their new system. So I don't know that anyone thought to update the website with the new system that they're using, but I think that I'm meeting with Ron. I think actually, Lorraine, you might be at that meeting. The next time we ask him about it.
I probably am at the meeting, Patrick. But with that, I think the new data, I think one of the issues with that, if that gets uploaded, it's not as searchable and easy. So I don't know if they're going to be working on that and making it a way that it's easy for citizens to be able to use it. Because I think one of the issues when we scan things in is we're not scanning things in or necessarily connecting a feed that's searchable in a way that's really usable. Because the feed that I got was not really searchable. It's all just one long list, and it's not in a searchable format. So if there's a way to ask about that too, would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Lorraine. Now we'll move to comments from the room. I think almost everybody had their hand up, so I will start in the front here. When you come into the microphone, please state your name.
Good evening, Peter Elman. I'll make this pretty short on my end. I was asked to come here tonight. If I wouldn't have been asked and I'd known I had the opportunity, I would have come on my own. Working in Essex and with Essex for 29 years, I've worked with a lot of different people in the town. administrators and employees. And I'm here really just to speak in support of your interim planning director, and I urge you to seriously consider taking that word interim away. I think you have an amazingly intelligent and dedicated person, and it's been a pleasure so far to work with her, and I would hate to lose Owisa to this town to somebody else. I can't speak for what she's planning to do, but it's been a pleasure, and I urge you to support omitting that word interim. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Peter. Okay, Patty?
And thank you, Peter, for coming. It appears to me Owisa Makuku is well-versed politically in the desires of both communities and is well-respected. We would here in Essex Center like her to be promoted to Director of Community Development right now. Not 2 years from now, not after whatever you all decide, but right now. If she's not promoted, then she should be considered a candidate to fill a town manager seat should an arrangement to replace an existing manager ever occur, because we don't know what's going to happen. And the other issue I want to bring up is it appears to me that the language being proposed for the plan of Town of Essex to consider, since the last couple of meetings, I watched a trustees meeting and I watched the select board meetings and on my tablet, and I couldn't speak because my microphone didn't work last time, is to me, it's I believe is simply a disguised plan of merger, which Essex Center residents voted down twice. So I don't quite understand what you're trying to do here. You don't have to explain an answer. I'd rather take my time to read things that have bothered me. I like to research, that's my background, research in ophthalmology in Boston and in Vermont. I researched the Vermont Leagues of City and Town Rules of Procedure for Municipal Bodies regarding public participation, public participation number 6, where they speak to order and decorum shall be observed by all persons at the meeting, any meeting. Neither members of the body, you guys, manager, select board, nor the members of the public, us, shall delay or interrupt the proceedings or the peace of the meeting or interrupt or disturb any member while speaking. Members of the body and members of the public are prohibited from making personal, impertinent, threatening, or profane remarks. Well, including the eye rolling, I think our first speaker was speaking about when a member of the public is speaking, especially the Essex Town residents, which I observe. My background in ophthalmology is observe, document, 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 document. The only other thing I want to share is that I love research. So I'm learning a lot about government. Transparency is an essential element of open and democratic government. In Vermont, the primary means of providing transparency are the state's open meeting law, 1 VSA 310 to 314, and the public records law, 1 VSA 315 to 320. We all know about this, but these laws, it's nice to review, implement the command of Chapter 1, Article 6 of the Vermont Constitution that officers of government are trustees and servants of the people and are at all times in a legal way accountable to them. You were all voted by us and you were accountable to us. So we would expect transparency from this moment forward. Every municipal board, council, commission, and committee legally defined as public bodies. So any committee, whether it's a running committee, the Memorial Hall committee, whatever committee of a municipality is required to comply with the open meeting law. I look forward to our guest, Jim Condos, to review open meeting law training because we could all use a review. And I thank you very much for letting me speak, not interrupting me, and not cutting me off. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Patty. And you reminded me of something that I did want to say during my introduction to Public to be Heard, that the select board does have a policy that only the chair can interrupt the recognized speaker. And so.
Well, thank you. And I want to add one more thing, that you do not deserve to be interrupted by anyone else on your body. which I also observed at the last select board meeting, if you go back and look. You don't deserve that. You're a good chair. Thank you.
I intended to remind everyone in the room, in the meeting, of the fact that interruptions are not allowed. Irene, did you want to go next? Just going through the rows here.
Thanks to Patty and those who've already spoken to courtesy given to people speaking from the public. At the last meeting, I responded to some insinuations from remote members of the public that merger opponents had spread misinformation. At that time, I alluded to the falsehoods that had actually come from staff and elected officials during the run-up to the merger votes. As I promised Evan, who interjected that staff did nothing of the sort, I would put it in writing, and I have, but I don't intend to have this buried in a reading file. So I'd like to quickly run through the top 10 myths that we heard from staff and elected officials in the run-up to merger. Some of them come out of this booklet, which everyone received in the mail. Others were on the website and have since vanished, which is very disconcerting to me because there's still a Greater Essex 2020 website there. But so many of these controversial statements have vanished, including a very controversial graph that I will never forget Andy Watts saying in the summer of 2019 should be put in the trash because there was so much incorrect information on it. There is no trace of that left. And I've asked Evan a few weeks ago to send it to me. He has yet to do so. At any rate, here are the top 10 myths that I narrowed down. There are many more. First of all, we were told that if merger passed, the town would gain budget per ballot. That's totally incorrect, of course, because way back in 2020 of November, we voted on a separate petition on a ballot, all of us, and approved putting the town budget on an Australian ballot. The second myth that we heard from staff and elected officials, the town outside the village would only pay $26 more per year if we merged. Wrong. The town outside the village would actually pay $26 more per year, which is very different than just per year. It compounds. But staff and elected officials, not all elected officials, but some of them, would tell us that $333 would be the total tax the town outside the village would see as a hike over those 12 years. That would be the accumulated dark bars on this chart. What they neglected to tell us was that these light blue bars are the cumulative cost to the TOV, and that over 12 years cost $2,374. Myth number 4. The merger tax increase for the town outside the village would stop after 12 years. Completely false. We would continue to pay those of us living outside the village that extra tax. It would just stop compounding and it would be renamed the town tax in year 14. And I show that on this graph for anyone who'd like to see it up close and personal. Myth number 5, the legislature would reconcile the two different merger charters into one. That's not their job. And in fact, Title 24 of Vermont Statutes Annotated, Section 1482 says that each municipal body must approve the same charter. Myth number 6. Merger would save money by eliminating duplicate services. We don't have any duplicate services in this town. We have some similarly named services, like we have 2 parks departments that manage different parks. We have 2 libraries that have different collections. We have public works departments that plow different streets. They're similarly named, but they do different things. There would be no savings by eliminating the duplicate services that don't exist. Next, we have number 7. Both separation and merger after tax would change 20%, but separation would mean an all-at-once change in taxation, unlike merger, which was to be spread out over 12 years. What we've just learned is that the separation timeframe is 3 to 5 years, and therefore we certainly could spread out any change in taxation over 3 to 5 years. It wouldn't happen all at once necessarily. We also heard myth number 8, that there were taxes paid by both the town and the village depicted by these pie charts. And these pie charts were equally sized. That's incorrect, of course, because when you show a pie chart with a $900 difference in one part of town, they should be different sizes. So the sizes of those graphs, and they could still be corrected because that graph still exists on Greater Essex 2020.org. Those graph sizes should be changed to be correctly denoting what the taxes are. Myth number 9, the town outside the village receives 100% back in services what it pays. Nope, sorry. The town outside the village actually pays 59% of the town's tax revenue. And of that revenue, 1.2 million goes to the village highway department, 15K goes to Brownell, 12K goes to EJRP, and guess what? Out of that 59% that the town outside the village pays to the police, they only had 49% of the police calls last year. So it's not true that all of the money coming from the TOV stays in the TOV and pays for things that the TOV only gets. Myth number 10, the town and village are separate municipalities. No, as I said repeatedly, maybe 100 times, I don't know, the town and village are nested municipalities, and yet we continue to see and hear people say they're separate. Gosh, if they were separate, why on earth would we be having a separation movement now in the village? And I guess most concerning to me of all is that I just went to the brand new website. Speaking of people helping publicize things, there's a new website that not all of you may be aware of called One Village, One Voice. It's about separation, and they've already got their first myth posted. It says, with separation, there would be one tax bill. For those who are not aware, we already have one tax bill. So I would encourage staff, elected officials, the public, and anyone else who creates websites or puts out flyers or just speaks to these issues in this town. It's very important to speak the truth and not to be making stuff up on the fly. And also, when you're corrected by someone who knows better, please take that seriously. Thank you. And these are the copies for the board and the management.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
Who's next? Yep, go ahead. Come on up. Yeah, for next comments. State your name, please.
I will, thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Mary Post, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting me speak, and members of the Select Board. I'm here to address what I believe is a big problem for our town. When mass shootings started happening, they would be covered on television on every network all day long. Today, we take mass shootings for granted. Some of them we never hear about, but I find their coverage while scrolling through Facebook. It's become normal to live with mass shootings. Our last merger attempt was, to me, the meanest, nastiest, and ugliest I have ever experienced. People were called liars. Some indeed did lie and were caught at it, but some went above and beyond the norm of our town and pulled dirty tricks that we've come to expect in our national elections. It's very sad. Our meetings have become nasty and out of control. I am very concerned for the treatment of members of our town who participate in the governmental process and then are defamed or have crude things said about them, ironically, just before we are all asked to make a pledge of civility. Doesn't anything have any meaning anymore? Mr. Chairman, I would ask you to ask our town manager to be respectful of citizens. I am angry that he is allowed to interrupt citizens and roll his eyes while they speak. He is being extremely unprofessional, and this behavior should not be tolerated, and it's hurtful. I am concerned that norms aren't followed during meetings by select board members themselves nor members of the trustees. I am appalled by the way you've been treated, Mr. Chairman, by one of your own board members and a former president of the trustees. You asked them not to speak as their own comments were not germane, but you were essentially shouted down and disregarded. you were disrespected. Not only has there been no consequence, in my mind, for all of these hurtful and demeaning events, but there's been no mention of them from the select board or town staff. Nothing's been said to address the elephant in the room or in the town. When things are ignored, they don't go away. They fester and create more ugliness and hate. I'm afraid if we don't address these issues, things will only become worse, if that's possible. We have become so polarized in so many ways. And I don't know about you folks, but I know that when I've had a big argument or something's ugly gone on in my own house with my spouse or somebody, and we don't talk about it, it just gets more and more toxic. It turns into a poison. I mean, even the way I make dinner reflects what's going on. The dog doesn't like it. And I think that this can happen to all of us. I have to say, just editorialize here, that I don't feel good about the things that I've said and done. And I've just had enough of it. And I think we do have good people here. And I just am really sad that this is what we've come to. I said in a previous meeting that attention to this situation will not go away. That was not meant to target one member of the select board, nor threaten him. Rather, it's to keep attention on these things so that we can address them and have them stop and not become normal. I honestly believe that all of us are better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Betsy, do you want to speak next?
I don't have anything more.
Don't have anything? Okay, thank you. Gabrielle. Did I miss Margaret? Margaret, did I miss you? No? Okay, Gabrielle.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Gabrielle Smith, and I am with Our Village, Our Voices. I'm on our steering team. And it was referred to earlier, our website is ourvillageourvoices.org. Encourage everyone to go check it out. It is indeed on our website, just to clarify, that we would, post-separation in the village, receive one municipal bill, one bill. Currently, I do get one physical piece of paper, but I'm billed by 2 municipalities. So post-separation, I would be billed by one. And I just wanted to clarify that was the intent of that communication on our website. So I just want to thank you all for what you do, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thanks.
Anybody else in that row? Bruce, come on up. Bruce Post.
Thank you. My name's
Okay,
Bruce
Bruce
Post, for the
Post.
record,
Okay.
and I live at 1 Cindy Lane. I chair the State Library Board, and we never get people to talk, get public to be heard. So this is interesting for me. And I'm not here to talk about merger or separation. I want to talk about executive session, and it's my experience with executive sessions in the past. I notice you'll be going in tonight. The trustees have gone in about various issues. There are times when the board in the past used executive session to hide from public discussion, and why that's potentially harmful. It happened with the local option tax, which we voted down in 2009. The public didn't find out that there had been any discussions about local option tax in the select board because they were all held, from what I could find, in executive sessions. Perhaps it was because there was going to be a memorandum of understanding with the trustees about how they would split it. But we found out about executive session after the board adopted, we found out about the local option tax after the board adopted the proposal in December of 2008. By that time, it was too late to change it. Public hearings were held where people would talk about it. But one piece of information that came in late doomed that tax and could have affected IBM considerably. We were told during those discussions about the local option tax that it would only tax lunches in the IBM cafeteria. 2 weeks before town meeting, when the local option tax is going to be voted on from the floor at town meeting, there was a letter in the consent calendar, and I noticed it said from IBM. I was not on the board at the time. I asked the clerk for the letter. It turned out IBM said the board was misinformed, that it would affect their warehouse operations, their office operations, and more than just the lunches in the cafeteria. I understand it could have been in the high six figures from what I've heard from inside information. If the board the previous year had had public discussions about the possibility of a local option tax, that might have been discovered during that public inquiry. Sometimes the public has good things to say and information that the board might not have, assumptions that you make that could be wrong. There was one particular example, and it was a dramatic example. And some of you may have been there the night of that town meeting. It was supposed to start at 7:30. It was a snowy, cold night. The line was out the door because somehow somebody leaked the letter to the press. The line was out the door. The meeting was supposed to start at 7:30. It started at 8:15, and with each minute that went by, Pat Scheidel's face sank farther and farther and farther down. And the local option tax was defeated. It didn't have to be that way. And so I understand there are legitimate times to go into executive sessions to talk to attorneys and this, but don't overuse it. And certainly don't make final decisions, fait accompli, that you present to the public later without asking the public first, what do they think about it? So that it's not too late to make adjustments. So it was just a cautionary tale from my experience in the past. I'm not accusing the board of hiding behind executive sessions at all. But there is a perfect example of where excluding the public was to the detriment of the town and the public. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bruce.
And my wife was talking the truth about how our discussions about merger affected our supper the other night.
So Ken Signorello.
Good evening, Ken Signorello. I think my comments will be refreshingly brief and minor, I hope. I was doing a bit of research recently about the town's history. Thought I'd go to the town website, which I did. Typed in history in the search field, and I got this blank page. It says history, but there's nothing there. Went to the village website, same thing, but there's history there. So I noticed that there's definitely a discrepancy between the website maintenance, which I think needs to be addressed. It's important. It's the front face of the town, and I think that it needs to be kept up to date. I heard the other comment earlier about the police website also, so it's kind of related. Second issue and last issue for me, I think 3 people now have asked that staff salaries be posted in the annual report. And I wonder just how many people have to ask before it'll appear on an agenda, at least, so that it'll be discussed and a decision made one way or the other. I mean, I suppose a petition would be in order. I could do that. But if I have to go through that much trouble, it's a lot of work. And I think that it's reasonable just to ask the select board to consider it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Barbara, did you want to speak? Barbara Higgins. Stating your name for you, sorry.
Barbara Higgins, 7 Cindy Lane. I have been concerned for some time with the time that's afforded citizens to weigh in on proposals before the select board, specifically before a vote is taken, and specifically with regard to proposals that establish policy or have significant impact. I realize there's some actions that are rather mundane and routine. I'm not talking about passing a liquor license or what have you. I'm specifically concerned that when a proposal comes before the board, either from staff or from a select board member, it's warned with the minimum required by law. The packet usually gets posted at the end of the day on Friday. That means that the citizen has over the weekend to research it, to develop a position, to gather information. That citizen can't contact anybody in the offices because the offices are closed. That citizen can come to a meeting and perhaps, time being available, may have an opportunity to speak, but that opportunity is limited in time, logically, because you don't have all night. Further, even if you write a letter, as I did not long ago, and I sent it to the members of the select board. Some of you may have read it, some not. I asked that it be read into the record. I received a response that perhaps I could have somebody else read it into the record. The purpose of a clerk is to read those letters into the record. There was no excuse for that not to happen. Further, that letter, of course, didn't get in the packet had someone not read it until the following meeting. Therefore, I think it is time for the select board to develop a practice by which significant actions, some of which are on tonight's agenda, but have been on agendas in the past and will be on the agendas going into the future, that they develop what I'm referring to as 2 readings, that it comes before the board once, there's a discussion, there's an opportunity with more than a weekend for citizens to offer either written or other testimony before it comes to a vote at the next either meeting or some agreed upon second consideration period. I thank you for your time, and I hope you will take that into consideration, both for establishing a policy going forward and as you continue to debate tonight on some very significant.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, anyone else who hasn't spoken want to speak? Don't see anybody, any hands up online either. My mouse sat idle long enough that it died. Okay, so we will move on to the next item of business. Discussion and potential action on community development fees. Did we so?
Hi, Owisa Makuku, Community Development Department. You have seen, or you've read the
Yes.
memo and seen the spreadsheet in the packet. Do you have any questions, or would you like me to, I guess, give a brief overview?
Give us a quick overview, please. Yeah.
So the questions are, what are goals in reviewing and changing fees? We believe that fees need to be raised. They haven't been raised in quite some time, and they're currently not covering staff time to review projects. And that's the biggest issue. We are also considering cost per square foot versus cost per $1,000 of estimated construction cost. And other than that, just a couple of considerations or clarifications. We would like, should we consider repair and maintenance free from permit fees? And are there any other waivers? Are there any waivers for desired features that we as community development can enter into discussions with the planning commission about, such as energy efficiency, affordable housing? With the inclusion of any of these components, does it make sense, or might it make sense or be a reflection of the town's values to allow some sort of waiver for those qualities, enhanced qualities in our zoning regulations and in our fee structure?
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from board members? Don?
Have you talked to any construction people about your proposal, or any people involved in building in Essex about your proposal?
About raising the fees? No.
Okay, I was just curious. And is anywhere in any of the paperwork a description of affordable housing and what it is?
Well, that we could develop those. So yes, there are federal guidelines for what constitutes affordable housing. It's usually housing for which an individual or family pays no more than 30% of their income on an annual basis.
So if you grant them this waiver because they have the desired feature of being affordable housing, is that your job to follow up to make sure that's happening, or can a contractor come in and say, "Yep, this is affordable housing," and they don't have to prove it to you?
Usually they enter into an agreement with a local nonprofit like Champlain Housing Trust.
Okay.
And they do the compliance monitoring over time. But again, like the discussion would happen with the planning commission. We can change the parameters. However, we see that they might fit the needs of Essex residents. And that would mean finding out demographic data, really sort of digging in and finding out what constitutes affordability in Essex. I mean, it might be different in Essex than it is in other communities.
Right.
But it's the exploration, I guess, that we're just asking about, and whether you would entertain those sorts of waivers.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other board member questions or Greg?
Just have an additional comment. As far as how Wiso and her team put some of the fees together, credit to her and her staff. They took a look at all of Chittenden County, took a look at what the fees are in other towns nearby to make sure that the proposal before you is competitive, that it's not really out of the ordinary in terms of the area. And a lot of areas I think we're behind our neighboring communities, and this is a way to catch up and get back to what the market is charging elsewhere.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Any other?
It's just a comment. I'm very interested in having a conversation around incentivizing the type of development that we want, what we want to see, and that's in line with our community goals.
Thanks, Tracy. Vince or Pat, any? One question, I guess, for me is the recommendation is that we adopt the fees as proposed. There's no mention of timeline. And I asked this question through email, and I guess the comment was it's probably appropriate to have some sort of lead time so that folks who are applying know that there's going to be a change coming. So is there in your thought, is there a recommended time frame for implementation? Is it September 1st, December 1st, January 1st? Is there any thoughts? Because we should probably, if we're going to do that, I think we should probably include it in the, if we approve it as is written, I think it makes it effective immediately, probably. I'd like to put a specific date there, specific date in there if we have thoughts on what that should be.
October 1st seems like a reasonable date by which we could get the word out to different developers and to residents about the change in fees.
Do you think that would prompt people to try to apply before they go up?
It could.
It could, yeah, okay. And
but a larger project. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I guess I would assume that if they get their applications in before October 1st, that we would honor the current fees as they are. They wouldn't, if they didn't complete the permit or whatever. I don't know how the process works.
If the application were deemed complete before October 1st, then we would honor the existing fees prior to October 1st. And larger, the one thing that I do have to say though is that it might fast track some projects for residents, but larger developers or larger developments, I mean, there are so many layers of work that need to go into them that it likely no one would be able to.
Okay, so it's not going to be a huge workload, huge workload on your staff if there's a fee change coming that would incent people to put their applications in.
I guess they could try. But again, if it were an incomplete application, then
Yeah,
we
yeah,
just have to send it back.
Right. Okay.
Or pause it, but to get the information that we need to adequately review it.
I guess that situation occurs regardless of what date you choose, that if there's a change, then
Although we did not look at our historic pattern of project reviews to see when the lulls might be, but that might have been a smart approach.
I had another thought, but now I've lost it. Just, I guess, just to be clear, the projected revenues that are in the FY22 budget were based on current fees. So if we change the fees, then there's a possibility that revenues could be, well, there's always a possibility that they'll be different than you budgeted.
Right.
But there's a potentially a possibility of it being higher than projected.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between this year and last year would be that last year we had a lot of people who were at home and noticed a number of things that they needed to have done in their house. And so I think we got more residential permits in last year, and we got fewer larger projects in last year because there was so much uncertainty and nobody knew when construction could start again anyway. And so I think that balance is going to shift in the next in this current fiscal year. That we'll get fewer residential projects and more larger projects.
Okay. Any other comments from board members? How do folks feel about the October 1st date?
Good.
Any public comments? Let me look online here. I see Ethan Lawrence hand up. Ethan?
I just had a question for Weso. I was wondering if in the policy that was written up there, is there anything as far as agriculture?
There's an agricultural zoning district, but short of planned unit developments or residential development, there isn't. I haven't seen an application come in for any of the agricultural areas that would be a large commercial operation or anything.
What about the smaller guys?
What about?
The smaller agriculture, like say I'm actually in the process. I gotta find out what to do, but like I want to put a barnyard in my yard, and I'll just, obviously there's set fees and everything, but I noticed that there was, the fees are going to go up, but then there's going to be stipulations for certain things to promote certain things. So I wasn't sure if agriculture was in mind in that, if that makes sense.
Are you in an agricultural district?
I'm actually in a conservational district just outside of the agriculture. I don't know the rules behind that. I'm sure you do.
Well, so much of it depends on exactly where you are and what the what your lot size is, what your circumstances are. I mean, if you're farming, there are certain right to farm concessions that the state makes for farmers. And again, without knowing the specifics about your situation, I really couldn't
say
anything to you. But if you come down to the office, before October 1st, we're plenty happy to talk.
Perfect. You inspired me. Like, here we go. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ethan. Let's see if I've got any other hands up. Let's see any other hands. No comments from the room. A board member like to make a motion, which includes the October 1st implementation date.
I make the motion that it says Select Board trustees adopt revised fees as laid out in Exhibit A to become effective on October 1st, 2021.
Do I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Vince. I think this is written this way because the same memo is going to both boards, so I think we should strike trustees from our
Right.
motion. But
I accept that.
Sounds okay with that. Vince, you're okay with that, so, okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Owiso.
Great,
And,
thank you.
Sorry we deferred you from the prior time you tried to come forward.
You better read the documents. If you don't know what you're passing, you shouldn't pass it.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I want to thank Owiso and her team. This has been a project on my to-do list to update the fees so that people are paying an appropriate amount for the services that they are getting so that the other taxpayers are not subsidizing that activity. It was work well done, well presented, and I want to thank her and her staff for that work and your time and attention. It may not be perfect and we can always adjust it, but hopefully a little bit more than once every 20 years we review our fees and et cetera of that nature. But thank you. Thank you.
Great, and I'll pass
Thank you,
along the
Lisa.
kudos.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Andy, there was a suggestion in the very beginning of the meeting, see if people could consider voting her into the full.
So that's not an agenda item. We can't act on that. And the select board has no jurisdiction over management of staff other than the town manager. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. Consider approval of added costs to complete the upgrade of the intersection traffic signals at Essex Way and the Circ Highway. Aaron, I believe.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. In person, this is great. We have our first in-person CWD meeting here coming up, so it's going to be good. Issue before you tonight is whether or not the select board will authorize the completion of the intersection traffic signal upgrade at Essex Way and the Circ Highway. A few years back, we did initiate a contract with East Coast Signals to do some work on this intersection to upgrade it. The signals there that were in place are well over 30 years old, dated, multiple issues, loop detectors failing. It seemed like just about every windstorm we found the traffic signal heads in the ditch line or underneath the overpass. And we had East Coast go out, take a look. Attachment 1 is the initial proposal they gave us. Over 19 and 20, we did perform some of this work. As you know, things got kind of wonky there in 2020. Scheduling conflicts, parts, materials. We only were able to perform some of the work. We did upgrade the radar controls, our sensors for the signals to actuate the signals. So it kind of sat dead for the rest of that year. What we did was had them go back out there, kind of do a tally of what is needed and what was supposed to be put in during the original contract. And you'll find that as attachment 2 to the sum of $94,750. Dennis also thought it important that we also add an additional upgrade to provide some preemption for this intersection for first responders and emergency vehicles. That's not in this memo, but that's on the order of $21,000 as well. So the total we're looking at is around $117,150, and I believe we kind of circled around the not to exceed maximum of $120,000 for the project. In addition to the original proposal they provided, they've also added some pedestrian upgrades, crossings in that vicinity. Definitely have seen more foot traffic in and around the Essex, and we wanted to make sure that all the pedestrians, at least going in through those two intersections, are safe and have, you know, the proper threshold and everything, and it's cycled in with the lights. I know there was a couple questions Greg forwarded on to us regarding costs. The town does have developer funds that we do charge. We have a traffic impact fee for various locations throughout the town. The town center has their specific traffic impact fee. Currently, we have about $161,000 in that account. It is a capital account, and we're requesting to tap not to exceed a maximum of $120,000 out of those developer impact fees to complete this project for the town. We have a recommendation there for you folks, and I can answer any questions or if you want further details on the actual project and or the funding.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Any questions or comments from board members? Looks like you're getting off easy here.
Damn.
Oh no, I gotta ask. What is a red vehicle? That red vehicle lighter that on one of the drawings it says red vehicle. Yeah.
Point me in that direction. We'll
Oh,
figure
I
this
can't
out.
find it now. You wait. It was like a red vehicle detection or something, and it was like it says red vehicle detection to be added. What is that?
Okay, so so there is some additional sensors in there that will provide kind of a better understanding of the controller at both those intersections of the actual vehicles that are there, and kind of optimize each of those intersections a little better.
Okay.
So it's an additional there are two additional sensors that are going on there.
Okay. Thank you.
Which has reminded me of a question. The left turn onto, if you're heading toward Lang Farm, the left turn onto 289, there used to be a red arrow and then a green arrow telling you when you could go. And that, I guess, in the first stage of this changed to just a green light. Is that? And there's a sign there that says yield to oncoming traffic now. Is that...
Yeah, there's going to be an additional sign, but it's also kind of going to mimic what we've seen all throughout the state system. You see that delayed yellow, flashing yellow.
Yep.
That will be implemented.
Yeah. So when that first changed, I had many people tell me that when they saw the light turn green, they immediately turned left in front of oncoming traffic because they were used to a green arrow there. And when it suddenly became just a green light, they thought it meant the same thing. And so it took people, I think, a bit to get used to that. So I'm glad to see we're putting in the delayed blinking yellow to.
And I think the yellow offers that contrast, so you don't. Yeah. Because green is jump. We are creatures of habit, and it doesn't matter if you see the green arrow or green. You're gonna go if it's.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any comments, questions from the public on this topic? Patty?
We had that with Sandhill.
Mr.
Patty,
Chair.
you might have to come up to the microphone. So
No,
people
I
online can
was just
hear
gonna say
you.
that we have that at Sandhill Road on 117 and Sandhill with that yellow blinking. It is so busy. 117 to Sandhill, like it seems like all of civilization. Everybody goes to Williston, the interstate. They don't go. Anyway, that yellow blinking light is definitely a godsend because you can't turn left.
No, it helps. It does.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Patty. I do see one hand online. Andy Champagne.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was just curious, since you're over your $120,000 budget, can you do it in piecemeal? Like, can you do like the 120 this year and then the rest of it next year? Does that work?
I don't think they're over the budget. Some of the money was spent previously, so this is asking for the funds to complete the project. Is that right, Aaron?
Correct.
Yeah. So
And we are using developer impact fees that we have collected over the years, and I am aware of that. I think they have a lifespan in which I think it's 6 years, and then the developer, if they're not used within those 6 years to improve any of the transportation infrastructure within that said corridor, they can request that those funds be given back to them. So I would rather use these funds to upgrade our infrastructure now, and use those impact funds rather than taking money out of the tax base.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the question, Andy. Anybody else? Okay, bring it back to the board. Any further comments? I'd like to make a motion.
I move that the select board approve the added cost to complete the upgrade of the intersection traffic signals in an amount not to exceed $120,000.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
You want to stick around for a couple minutes for the Memorial Hall, just in case there are questions?
Okay, moving on to business item 5C, consider approving dissolution of Memorial Hall Committee. Evan, Greg, who's gonna?
Here, I'll kick it off.
Mm.
So this is something that's actually been on staff's radar work list for at least a couple of years now. Darby Mayville had been working on this before she left, and it's one of those things that just kind of fell off the radar as other things became more important. As Linda Mons, who's our new administrative assistant, as she took over and she handles a lot of the boards and committees and setting up, tracking the volunteers, scheduling meetings, stuff like that. She realized that the Memorial Hall Committee was not meeting, so she asked about it. I gave her some of the history in terms of how we had, Darby and I had started working on bringing the possibility of dissolving the Memorial Hall Committee to the Select Board. When Darby and I started working on that a couple of years ago, the Memorial Hall Committee hadn't been meeting, wasn't really accomplishing or serving its mission, partially probably because there was no staff support for the committee at the time, and the committee barely had a quorum if it did at times. Reached out to some members of the committee a couple of years ago who agreed that there should be some sort of oversight of Memorial Hall, but also that there wasn't a whole ton of work being done. Committee wasn't meeting. So fast forward to 2 years now, and it's been more than 3 years since the Memorial Hall Committee has last met. Linda included the mission of the committee in her memo. Those things just aren't being done. Let's see. The committee does not have a quorum right now. I'm sure you'll hear from some people tonight. Once this came out, I did hear from 5 people who are interested in serving on the committee. Still, staff doesn't really have the ability to staff a committee at this point. We're confident with between Public Works and our buildings manager, Tom Yandow, and Parks and Rec Department being able to oversee the facility. They've put on a new roof in the past few years, done some other upgrades. I do acknowledge and recognize the timing of this, with some talk about the Essex players and their role within Memorial Hall. Believe it or not, it is coincidental that you're seeing this now. That's an issue where our Parks and Rec departments were trying to find some additional childcare space, which is needed. We have childcare shortage in town, and Memorial Hall was considered. So there's some conversations with the players about what that might look like. But as far as what's before you tonight, just explaining why the committee hasn't met and why staff is looking to make it more official, that it would be no longer a committee, but obviously open to discussion, and I'm sure you'll hear some feedback tonight, and happy to try to answer any questions that the board and the public have.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Anything to add, Evan? Are you
No, he covered it.
all? Okay.
And
Before we start, my child's mom is on the board of the Essex Community Players, starting as of last week. So just want to make sure people are aware of the potential conflict of interest as we're discussing this. I feel I can be neutral and objective, not need to recuse myself from the discussion, but I do want to make sure that people are aware.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Any comments or questions?
I guess my question is in the last paragraph, Public Works and staff are confident that Memorial Hall activities can be discussed between Public Works, Parks and Recreation, and the Essex Community Players. Are there any stakeholders that would not be covered under those 3?
It gets rented out occasionally from people looking to hold a party or a birthday party or small event. I don't think there's anyone who does that consistently, a formal group to reach out to. It's, from my understanding, it's more of a, every now and then the rec department gets a request and they book it if it's available.
Currently, the seniors from the senior center, which hasn't reopened, has been using some of the space. The stakeholders are also the recreation department, so their camp. Some days camp is in there. You know, if it's raining or something, they will use that facility. And Greg mentioned it is rented occasionally through there. The parking is very limited on that parcel, and one of the one of the largest stakeholders is the Essex players. And when we approached them, we were actually just looking to see what their use was and would it be able to be used both for childcare, which is a pressing need in the community, and or their uses. And we even looked at where else they could go and could we help them go there. And when it turned out that it wasn't going to work, we backed off from the discussion. So again, the building itself is managed by the recreation department. It is maintained by the public works department. And over the last couple of years, we fixed the front stairs, which go into the building. We have not replaced the roof, but repaired the roof. We are constantly having HVAC problems in that building because it's old and it's not it's old, it's an old style, and then when you add the heat of lamps, the system has a hard time, but the players make it work. And then we have looked at other things, like we have a kitchen update to do. We've done a little bit of it, and the bathrooms are old, but overall, we know what the building is. We know what the property is and needs. So we are not believing we need a committee to work on that. Maybe sometime in the future, if someone wants to discuss what the rec department has in store for it or other future uses, yes, but not the building and its structure.
Yeah, no, like the Boy Scouts have often used it for Eagles ceremonies, and it's through the rec department. And I think often if it's rented by a nonprofit, the fee is refunded afterwards if there's no damage. So they're not trying to advertise that, but I know that
if there's no damage,
that we have
Define
the
damage.
Boy Scouts have done, essentially get free use of it because of the nonprofit status of the organization using it. But
So, given all these other people involved in Memorial Hall, what was the purpose of the Memorial Hall committee?
Best I can tell you is what's in the mission that's included in the memo. It was before my time, but to plan and facilitate the use of Memorial Hall, explore grant availability and execute fundraising efforts, including the governing and accountability of such funds, suggesting uses and scheduling of Memorial Hall, working with private firms to improve the heating, seek plans for structural modifications to improve the building for public use, plan additions and improvements, assist in the integration of social activities, and annually provide recommendations to the select board on usage fees for Memorial Hall. And I cannot remember that last one happening since I've been here.
So, if that was their directive, how did this all end up back at Public Works and back in Essex Rec if that was the directive for the committee?
Sorry, could you say that again?
So, if this was the directive, this is what you expected the Memorial Committee to do, how did this part of this, or most of this, end up back at Parks and Rec and Public Works?
I'll look to Aaron if he wants to add anything to what I'm gonna say, but I think it's kind of just the nature of how things happened. Committee probably wasn't meeting that regularly. They'd have to work through Parks and Rec and Public Works to accomplish a lot of those things on the mission anyways. I'm guessing there was probably some synergy between the three of them, the committee and those two departments. And as a committee, wasn't meeting as frequently as maybe it once had. It probably just landed more onto the municipal staff. I don't know if Aaron knows any more to that.
You'd have to come up to the Sorry.
I think some of the initial history of the committee had to do a lot with, I mean, there was a time when that building was not used at all.
I remember
No
when
upgrades.
when the bats took over. Yes,
I helped clear out some of the bats in the belfry there for a while.
I remember it well.
I think what happened was the committee was set up to help initiate those initial changes, modifications, upgrades, and rehab of that building to kind of make it a community effort. And over time, as Evan and Greg were both saying, a lot of the maintenance of the building is taken place by Public Works, and Parks and Rec runs all the programs out of the building. But yeah, it was one of those buildings we did have in the center. Like the library at one time was vacant. I'm sure you remember that as well. So.
I do. Okay. My concern, this may not even prove true, is that we seem to expect Public Works and Essex Parks and Rec to continue adding to their pile of stuff to do. Whereas if you could keep a committee active and taking care of this stuff, it would take responsibility and pressure off these other two groups. Because you keep telling us everybody's overworked, guys. And now you're telling us, well, let's get rid of this committee and we'll just give the responsibility to Parks and Rec and Public Works.
Yeah.
That's my concern, is what I'm hearing here.
If I may.
Go ahead, Greg.
Understood. Valid concern, and thank you for looking out for staff.
No,
I would say that it's already been with Public Works and Parks and Rec. They already have this responsibility, and they have for at least several years now. To meet with the committee, to take those recommendations, to support a committee as they go out for grants, to schedule meetings, to staff meetings. That's what's going to be the additional staff work and the additional staff time. Our staff is already going after the grants. They're already budgeting for repairs to Memorial Hall. Parks and Rec is already doing the scheduling. It wouldn't increase their workload to get rid of the committee at this point.
but you do understand why I'm.
I do.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right on.
And in addition, over the years, last year we added Tom Yandow, who started out as our building maintenance manager. And one of the things that we tasked him with was to go through our building. So while at one point the committee probably was our eyes and ears on the ground, and in that building we now have more staff that's not me and Greg and Marguerite and others that are in our buildings, that are meeting with contractors, that are getting prices. And then we also have other departments looking at grants that do that application work. In fact, it's very important that we track our grants because some of them have very stringent requirements, and we do get inspected and get audited from those grants. So it's very important that when we do get a grant, we're involved in the grant writing and the funding and the inspection work. So, but thank you for thinking of staff too. We are not looking to take on more. We're just looking to do it efficiently. And this building we'd like to see its use go up. We would like to see its quality of the structure and your experience inside that building go up. We do have older buildings. We, as you all may know, we've just spent a lot of money on the Essex Free Library to keep it from flooding. We have spent a lot of money in mold remediation at the fire department. We have been working slowly at this building to make it weather proof and trip hazard wise deal with the stairs and the experience inside. So that's what we've been working on, and all of those were done without a committee.
And Tracy?
When I first read this, I was a little confused whether the actual issue was the committee itself or that the charge wasn't really a committee charge. It was a mesh of a committee and a staff charge. So I immediately thought that it may make more sense to, instead of dissolving the committee, to update the charge to reflect what they should actually be focusing on. And from the memo off the top, that would include facilitate the use, community advertisement, suggest uses and scheduling, community input on who, how, when, so on and so forth, and assist in the integration of social activities. I think that those are items that are more geared toward a community committee rather than including, working with private firms. I see that more as a staff level involvement. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. And as I was speaking, my question on stakeholders earlier, it may make sense to include community development in those stakeholders as well as Parks and Rec, Public Works, and the community players.
Thanks, Tracy. Any other comments? Anything you want to?
Well, I do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Vince.
Do any other like buildings have committees? Like any other singular building? I mean, like there's going to be libraries and
So when the police station was built, there was a committee that worked on that. When this building was renovated, there was a committee that worked on that. They were shorter term, and they dealt with what they were working on, and then were dissolved. So no, I don't think there's no other.
There's the tree farm management group, but I'd say that's more of a standalone entity than a support committee.
Right. Okay, I suspect there are folks from the public who are wishing to speak. So I will go ahead and start. Betsy Dunn. And yeah, you'll need to come up to the microphone, state your name.
Hi, my name is Betsy Dunn. I live on 2 Cindy Lane, somewhere there. And I am concerned. I actually have gone to the website several times when I retired, thinking I'd have a slot of time, which I eventually didn't, but I wanted to volunteer for. And I've never seen an opening or a statement that the Memorial Hall has a committee that had openings on it. And if you were considering making it into childcare, and then could the players also use it, you would have to change the physicality because the kids would need more than just one bathroom for boys and girls, which is what they have now currently, just those one stalls for those rooms. And because little kids like to go more than one person at a time. And if you change the character of the room because you have different age groups that you're doing, when the community players are doing their plays, they have their scenery up, and that would interfere with the kids as well. And so it would not be compatible, I think. And to lose the Essex community players to this community would be, I don't think it's the best idea. I think it's something we need to have for this area. And my husband and I were both in theater before we came to this area. He was the manager at the Flynn when he first came here, a lighting designer. He has worked for the Essex community players, and we would have opened up and been on the member for the community players board as well. But I think that having the Parks and Rec, and I'm assuming that's Essex Parks and Rec that is in control of that building and not the Junctions Essex Recreation. And I think we need to think about, for instance, when we have Jim Condos come and talk to us, you could have him speak there. And you could have that whole use of all that wonderful seating for people to come and hear what he has to say. Our Essex reps for the state legislature come and they have conversations with all of us. They could use that as that space. And I think there's multiple kinds of things that you could use that space for and bring in some interesting speakers that people in the town would be interested to hear. Or if when we do this whole thing with the forums, it would be also a place that you can invite people in and come. And it would be a usable space, and people would start using it more because they go. So I would encourage you to leave the leave that Memorial Hall as it is, and help have people be on the committee to look at, see what can we bring into this facility that would make our town richer, not poorer, by losing the Essex Theater. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Betsy. Patty. Patty Davis.
Yes, Patty Davis, and I just want to say, you guys all know I live off Sand Hill Road. I keep talking about it. We have so many young families that have moved here, and some of my really close friends on my circle. I just had a neighborhood party on Saturday night and had like 8 families in my circle, and most of these people have lived here 35 years. So I know about the Boy Scouts. I know that the Boy Scouts use that area because Ellen Turnbull knows you, and she said, yeah, my son was in the Boy Scouts, you know her. Anyway, small world. But the what I'm saying is just what Betsy is saying, that now that we have all these young families, I think that, and most of these families talked a lot about the YMCA for childcare for Essex town residents, and they miss it. So I know that's not a topic of discussion, but I think we should keep Memorial Hall for the public, for plays, everything Betsy just said, for the Boy Scouts, for the Girl Scouts, and for speakers like Jim Condos. That's a great idea. And then this way, if you think financially, if you make a list, 2 sides, daycare versus public, you know, what public wants, you're going to have to revamp that whole building to make it a daycare. And because Essex Town is growing so much, it's not going to be suitable. You'd be better off looking into the YMCA. That's my opinion. To have them, you know, to do the daycare thing, renting out rooms in a school somewhere for kids, and keeping the public, because it's growing so much. Essex Town, we have 11,600 of us, with lots of kids. Thanks.
Yep, thanks, Patty. So to make something clear, is the decision been
Decision
made?
is that they are not doing that.
Sorry, Pat. He's asking the same question.
Yeah. The decision, if your question is, has the decision been made? It's been to move on to look at other facilities.
Right. So the daycare is not. There's no longer a consideration to put daycare into that building. So just to be clear, because I know it's come up a couple of times. Just wanted to clarify to clarify that. And along with the I think the plan, when there was a consideration to put the daycare in there, it came with funding to upgrade the building that would have come from EJRP. So because they would be the ones that would be potentially. I mean, that was my understanding of the discussion there. So it's gone. So anyway, the request that's come up a couple of times during comment here to put childcare in that building is no longer under consideration. So, Mary.
Mary Post, 1 Cindy Lane. I hope I say this in the right way, because I'm not trying to be to criticize. But to me, this whole issue kind of reflects what we've been talking about tonight, and what a lot of us have experienced in the last few years, or we feel like we have, where this all of a sudden came up. We've had this is our first notice that we even heard. Well, this would have been the first notice that we had known that there was maybe going to be a change at Memorial Town Hall. We just happened to learn about it earlier by a few days, because some of us know people that are part of the Essex Players who were, from what I've heard, were pretty much shocked and dismayed by all of this. So then this starts this whole tempest. And then it makes me feel like, why don't we even know about this ahead of time? And I think like Barbara said, bring it up so that we all have a chance to hear about it and feel like it's not just being suddenly, shoved on us. And then give us time till the next meeting to reflect on it, talk to neighbors, get things going. And then we can have this talk, and then you hear what the community wants to hear. I remember in the last meeting, Greg claiming that staff just couldn't understand, and this is Jermaine, couldn't understand why the merger went down. And I think that big part of the reason is nobody is really listening to the public or inviting their comments. And this public to be heard isn't a real discourse either. But anyway, this is another example. I don't want to lose my train of thought here. Of where we feel like we're not being heard or we're not being asked our opinion. It's just that this shows up and then all of a sudden it's maybe going to be a vote on it. Has anybody asked our opinion, and given us some time to think about it? That's all. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Mary. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Karen Hammer Williamson. I live at 12 Heatherbush Road in Essex, and I'm here today just on my own behalf, though I am a current member of the Board of Directors of Essex Community Players, an 18-year member, and I served twice. I was appointed twice to the Memorial Hall Committee, and I'm also a lifetime member and former executive producer of Georgetown University Mask and Bauble Dramatic Society. I've been an advisor on the strategic directions for arts space and multi-purpose space for St. Johnsbury Academy. That advice led to the development of the Moore Center for the Arts, which was a multi-million-dollar project that the funds were raised more quickly than for any project in the history of St. Johnsbury Academy. I also served on the board of directors for the YWCA of Vermont during the years when it developed and operated childcare programming in multi-purpose spaces in churches throughout Vermont, most of which are really old buildings that have a lot of the issues that you've been describing about Memorial Hall. And perhaps also notably, I was the head of residential alternative development for the Vermont Department of Aging and Independent Living during the Shift the Balance years, and I was charged to develop projects and funding sources to create senior housing assisted living, the homes for the terminally ill. The SASH program was an initial project of mine before I grew it to the point that the state couldn't support it and it went to Cathedral Square. And I oversaw a portfolio directly of more than $5 million and influenced tens of millions of other dollars. From my perspective on a practical measure, I left the committee in 2018 after the committee didn't have a regular meeting time. At that time, it was understood that monthly meetings might be desirable, but that quarterly was all that was required. But they were having trouble scheduling that. It was seen as a shared committee and staff issue at the time, from my perspective, and one that could be remedied. I'm not sure that monthly meetings are always needed, depending on how you deal with the charge, but I think it would be a tremendous mistake at this point to do away with the committee. I have provided assistance to the town in all the areas on that charge, helping identify funding sources, which included in the last renovation funding for arts programming to be included in the mission of the hall. I've provided guidance both to the players and to the town on how different operational issues could be handled to better integrate multiple populations. One thing that hasn't been discussed is that the players has developed technical capacity in the hall in terms of lighting instrumentation in the ceiling and other wiring. And it, in an agreement, a kind of tacit agreement with the town, there can be nominal charges if the equipment is to be extensively used by another user, but we provide free technical assistance and the use of many of our boards and other equipment to groups. So when something becomes infeasible for the players, it's not just infeasible for the players, but it becomes difficult for smaller groups that look to the technical resources and the expertise of the Essex community players. While we're amateur, many of us have professional or university experience. And so we have a lot to share in terms of knowledge of arts grants. And most of us participate in multiple arts programs in the state. I've written grants also to the federal government, as well as the state in conjunction with arts programs and libraries. So I did apply to serve on the Memorial Hall Committee. At the time I had to leave, I was also dealing with a job change. I'm a social worker in geriatrics and disability. I now work for the ALS Association, coordinating all the services to people with ALS in the state of Vermont. So I travel statewide, but I'm home based now. And I have 5 aging parents over the age of 87, so life is really interesting. But being home based, I would be glad to serve if there's a way that the Memorial Hall Committee can be of more service. The last thing I would say is that developing even community theater projects is a multi-year process. So advanced planning and notice of change is really helpful. We have the capacity now to support community productions in a way that is accessible to people with disabilities, that is safe in terms of process. I greatly respect the different capacities of the town to deal with the building, but how the building lives and breathes in this type of programming is a whole nother issue. And I believe that the Essex Players representatives and the theater community representatives on the committee have brought a lot of expertise in how to deal with that. When I started with the Players, I was stage managing productions, and we did all of our rehearsing in the hall. We moved almost all of that activity out of the hall to accommodate other groups. That's a difficult thing to do. So we were in there many days and providing a lot more funding to the hall. So I just would encourage that you consider retaining the committee, but figure out how to make it more doable for staff to support and to take advantage of all the expertise that's available. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Bruce Post. Up to the microphone, please. Yeah.
I didn't hear a word she said. And I just want to ask us, what are these round things there? Are they speakers?
So yeah, they are. The system we had, if you remember, back after the building first reopened, we had some wireless microphones that served to connect to both the television and to the room, and we no longer have that. Those wireless microphones did not work reliably.
No,
and so unfortunately, yes, right.
The reason I'm asking is because the home audience, which we now can talk about, is at an advantage. They can actually hear people speaking. It's very difficult, especially when you're a geezer like me, to hear these things. And with speakers here, you must have the technical capability of connecting these mics up to a PA system so folks can hear. And as a public body, you should, I was thinking, is this a violation of the ADA?
The discussion we're having is about the.
I can't hear you.
With the discussion we're having is about the Memorial Hall Committee meeting.
This is just.
Thank you for your comments.
I've had something to say about Memorial Hall, but it's important. I would love to have heard what she said. I couldn't hear a word, and I think you have to take this seriously. Yeah. We can have good discussions here, like about Memorial Hall. I'll get that much in. But you have to think seriously about the quality of the PA system here, because the people who attend are at a disadvantage.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. But let me say this. I bet you didn't imagine that so many people would want to talk about Memorial Hall tonight. But there was a Welsh, English poet named Edward Thomas, a friend of Robert Frost, very good friends. He wrote a poem once called First Known When Lost. And when a number of us heard about the threat to the continuation of Essex community players at Memorial Hall, that poem came to my mind. And we didn't want to let Memorial Hall go without being involved in a discussion about it. So there you go. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. Ken Signorillo. And if you could speak loudly.
Well, here's a suggestion.
Yeah, I think.
Whoa. So I'm sorry.
There, maybe that will help a little bit.
Mr. Chair, that was set up for the production value.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry about that.
My voice is going this way.
So we may need to reconsider the configuration of the room, and we have already talked about the fact that we're going to have a mic stand for folks to stand at in a perhaps we could have it oriented such that the speaker is facing
Kitty corner,
toward
yeah.
everyone in the room rather
Ken,
than
Ken
to the back of
Signorello.
the audience. Yep.
So when I heard about the potential eviction of the Essex community players, the first thing I did was go to the website, as always, and it wasn't up to date at the time, but I just checked, and now it is up to date. I'm glad to see that the website's been updated. Looks great. I said it before, and I'll say it again. We need a nominating committee. The reason why folks weren't applying for vacant spots is because they weren't aware of it. A nominating committee, just of 3 or so people, would help a lot, I think, in this case. Advertising the vacant spots, identifying potential people and suggesting that they apply. I applied. I visited Memorial Hall and I saw what was happening, and it's a lovely building. It's being used as this for the senior center at this point. Looks great. I play contract bridge, so I might even join in a little bit. One of the activities that's there. And one of the things I noticed, and I haven't never heard talked about, is how there's a natural outdoor theater behind it. It would be set up, it's set up perfectly, slopes down to what would be a stage area. I happen to have seen a presentation by Bread and Puppets recently at a very similar location. Could be easily done, I think, and that's one of the things that I'd love to see a committee move on. I think that's what a committee does. It looks outside of the normal day-to-day operations and really would help a lot with possible new uses of that facility. So there were 2 reasons put out why the committee should be dissolved. 1, lack of interest. I think that's a moot point at this stage. There seems to be plenty of interest now that folks are aware of it, and that staff couldn't support the committee. But I would ask that what extra work would there be for staff? Going to maybe a once-a-month hour meeting is about what I imagine compared to what's currently being done. So I'd suggest that the 2 reasons put forth for disbanding the committee don't hold water. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Any other comments in the room? Irene?
Thank you, Irene Renner, Thrush Lane.
And speak loudly, please.
Irene Renner, Thrush Lane. I think one of the missing stakeholders, when we talked about the list earlier, would be the taxpayers. I think the taxpayers have invested a ton of money, whether it's heating, lighting. So I think having a committee of regular folks, along with people like Essex players, to look into current and different uses of the building would be very prudent. I heard earlier someone say that parking's limited. Yes, if you don't go there very often, it might look like parking's limited, but those of us who go to plays there or usher there know that they tap the logging business across the street, use that parking lot. The free library parking lot is used for productions. The Essex Elementary School parking lot is used. So I think it's deceptive. There's actually a lot of parking in the center of Essex that's very walkable to that location. I really like Tracy's suggestion of just changing the charge rather than dissolving the committee. So kudos to Tracy for coming up with that. I've noticed that some committees at Town Hall get a lot of staff support. I've been to Essex community development meetings for years now, and I often see 4
So,
staff
Irene,
members.
we're talking
dialing
about
in.
we're talking about Memorial Hall. Is this
Understand.
relevant to Memorial?
It's related to the committee. Yes, I was told that staff don't have time to staff a meeting. Say a quarterly meeting of the Memorial Hall Committee. I would ask that maybe one of those 4 staff members that goes to the Economic Development Commission meetings twice a month, take an hour out of their schedule and come over to Memorial Hall and chat with those of us who are really interested in promoting that building and keeping it going. You know, I just think that that's a real challenge to tell taxpayers we don't have enough staff time when there are regularly 4 staff people that tune into that kind of meeting, and again, twice a month. So I think that's all from here. Thanks so much for having this extended discussion. I think it's very important for taxpayers, as I said, to have a check and balance on staff activities. I am so thrilled that we have Tom Yando looking into it, and Public Works Dennis has always had his finger on the pulse along with Aaron as to what's going on at Memorial Hall and how to make it better and to make it less of a money pit than it already is. And Recreation, of course, has always booked the calendar there. So yeah, staff has always had an integral part of keeping it going, but I think having a check and balance from residents would also be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Irene. Anyone else in the room? I can't see everybody. Okay. There are a couple of hands up. Andy Champagne, your hand is up, but it's still up from the last time. Do you have comments on this topic?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So $19 million budget and people can't hear in the room? That's not acceptable.
The discussion is about Memorial Hall Committee, Andy.
Yeah, don't interrupt people and let them talk too. You know, this is kind of when we go back to like trying to get
the topic.
the input.
You need to stay on topic, though.
Oh, okay. So that's coming next.
You're off topic.
Okay, if you just listen, turn your ears on, listen to what I'm about to say. You might hear something, get some input.
Andy,
okay.
To your point, please.
Yeah, I can. You pissed everybody off doing this, by the way. Okay, you can't. I mean, this is the talk of Essex Poly Talk. Okay, what we heard was one day the players got a message that they can't use that space anymore, and they were kicked out because they needed it for childcare. That's what they heard. Now, I also can't believe that somebody came along and put children in a rundown building. Are you out of your mind? Who's making the decisions around there? The next thing is, we just got done fighting a war in Afghanistan for 20 years, and you have a building called Memorial Hall, and it's run down. What are you doing? These people have died for our country, and it's a Memorial Hall. You gotta be kidding me. And the other thing is, the kids from the high school could also use that building too. I'm sure they'd like to play together. Some kids out of the drama departments in the schools, I bet they would like to use it. But anyway, I'm done.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, Lorraine.
Hi, Lorraine Zaloom. Just a quick question. Can you give me some context on the Essex players and how it relates to Memorial Hall? Were they asked to leave? I just would like to know more about the story. And did they have any guarantees, or are there contracts, or what's the nature of the relationship with the building?
Evan, you want to cover that?
Well, I don't know what their arrangement is with the town. I've not seen a contract.
There's no formal agreement, right?
They have been in that space for, I want to say 70. Yeah. Okay. I know of only 40, but in some form or fashion. Okay. So I was at 40, someone said 70, and we landed at 55. We were approached by EJRP and the school district about 22 families shortage for childcare. We were looking at places that we own versus renting other places, which drives up the cost of the childcare abilities. All of our other spaces are full, and the school district has its other issues with giving up more space for their operations. So we entered into a discussion with the players. I said that before when we started talking about how the space was used, how many weeks they have to use for their rehearsals, the setup. And once the set is in place, nothing goes on in that space. Nothing. So it's literally 3 or 4 weeks for that production. Not much happens inside the building. When we realized they couldn't find another suitable space, the time was crunched. We both said, okay, it's not going to work. And it got dropped. The reason why there was no public meetings is staff was doing due diligence on the issue. There was nothing to bring forward other than we were exploring options. That's the answer.
So Lorraine, the Essex players were not asked to leave the building. There was a question about use of the building, whether there was any way to have shared use, or whether if there was any way for them to, if they could move to another location with help from the town.
Mhm.
So it was exploratory, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Now, if it would have worked, we would have had a serious conversation about how it would work, if it could work, and what is the highest and best use for our community at a given time. It never got to that point. And I want to thank Marcus Serta, who is in those discussions, and for being, we worked very well over one or two discussions, and then it dropped. We have these types of things occasionally in other facilities, like our ball fields, like our tennis courts, like our pools.
right. So then the other question then is, given, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, who spoke from the board of community players, the eloquent speaker earlier. Were people who served on the committee contacted before this discussion? Like as part of this discussion, did the staff reach out to them before bringing it to the table as an agenda item?
Is Marcus Serta the chair of the board?
Yes.
Which board are you asking about?
Oh, so I mean the committee, committee members.
Memorial Hall Committee doesn't have enough members to meet. It doesn't have enough member to have a quorum, so there was no.
But that woman who spoke said she served on the committee.
She had served on the committee.
She's not
2 or 3
currently on
years
the
ago.
committee. She served on it in the past.
Yeah, is that like 2018? It sounded like no.
I believe there.
Yeah.
There are. I think Irene is one of the members on the board. I think there are 3 out of 7 seats are filled at this point.
So I guess my question just is, were any of the members of the committee contacted about tonight in terms of the staff recommending this?
Staff didn't recommend anything. They were just investigating it. There was no.
As far as
the committee did not
No,
specifically informed, nor did they meet
No,
on this topic. Or am I wrong?
I mean the solution of the. It sounded like it was a staff recommendation the way it's written on the agenda. So that's why I was curious about what was was the committee contacted in terms of thinking about this? That's all I'm asking.
So Lorraine, when I first introduced this, and I mentioned how this is something that's been on our radar for at least a couple of years now, we had reached out to current committee members about 2 years ago when we first started looking into this. It did not reach out again at this current time, as I don't believe there are any active members since the committee hasn't met in 3 years. So I'm not sure if there's anyone to reach out to, but when we first started this a couple of years ago, Darby Mayville and I did reach out to members at that time.
And I only asked that, Greg, because of, we just got through COVID. So it's a weird time. And I'm just thinking in the future, it might be helpful to reach out to committee members that did serve on it, because, there's a lot of stuff that's happened. It's been a weird year.
Right. Thanks, Lorraine. All right, let's bring it back to the board.
I had another question.
Andy, you already had a chance. You already spoke. So, sorry.
Did the staff have any email documents or anything about this that we can actually check? No? Then they are lying.
Andy, you already spoke. If you want to make a records request, please go through the appropriate records request channels.
I'm just a regular guy. I don't know anything about anything. I just showed up at the meeting, dude. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm just a concerned citizen.
If people have questions about records, I am the contact person for records, and you can reach out to me and we can figure out what the request is.
I would say that we should look at the records before we make a decision.
Okay, so we're bringing this back to the board. Pat, go ahead.
Most of what I've heard tonight is a conflation of the Essex community players and their future versus the Memorial Hall Committee, which are two very distinct things. I can say that before I was even ran for a school board, I submitted a request because it was advertised back in 2015, 2016 about being on the Memorial Hall Committee. And even 6 years ago, the response I got was, we don't meet anymore. It's been 6 years since that committee has really done anything tangible, I would say. I think a lot of people are here because they heard that the Essex community players are being kicked out. And again, my child's mother, and I've been deeply involved in theater in this community in South Burlington as part of the Flynn as well with different productions. That's not what's going on here. What is going on here is that we have a committee that has not met in any legitimate manner for 6 years now. If there's real legitimate interest, then I wonder where it's been. I mean, right now, nothing that I hear the reforming of the committee would do would take a lot of staff time. Talking about 1 hour a week, that's not what a staff liaison to our committees do. They have to spend an extensive amount of time if there's going to be, say that committee wants to pursue grants, if that committee wants to go after different theater groups to come in. It's going to take a lot of coordination, and that adds to that time that just simply, as our staff has said, doesn't exist. I don't see that the Memorial Hall Committee itself needs to be, basically what we would be doing is, by saying that we want to keep this committee, we would need to revive it. I mean, I just want to make sure that we're making that distinction. Are there going to be 7 members of the community who are going to step up, hold those meetings, and then are we willing to say we are going to offer our staff's time much more than just 1 hour to go to those meetings? Because I saw Greg nodding his head, and I don't want to single you out, Greg, but it's much more extensive than that. And the current members of the committee who are on there, I haven't heard from them about wanting to do more with the committee until tonight. So where has the interest been? I respect and understand that there's been some furor about the Essex community players possibly being moved out, but that was an exploratory thing, as staff has mentioned. That's not the same thing as dissolving a committee, which is well within the purview of the select board, that has not done anything for over 6 years. And I wanted to be on that committee, but I was just told point blank, we don't do anything. We don't meet. So I find it difficult to consider us saying keep the committee when I don't really know that we're going to have the continued community involvement, the interest, and then we would be forcing staff to put that time, their time, into supporting it in that much of a manner.
Right, thanks, Pat. Any other board member comments?
I do have a question for Greg. Did you say you'd had 5 phone calls for volunteers?
Emails, but yes.
So one of the things that Tracy, you mentioned, and some others mentioned, it was the possibility of having this committee do programming in that space rather than focus on the building itself. Programming would typically need to come with a budget. And so we don't have anything currently in the plan to do, for programming in that building. It would have to come from somewhere else. But the other thing is, I have to disclose, like Pat, my wife, is a library trustee. The library does programming as well, and they budget for it, or the library players, or the library friends of the library, I guess, or whatever they're called. They're the nonprofit that's associated with them, funds that. And so I think if we were to reboot the committee, it would be more appropriate to reboot it as part of our budgeting process with a budget to support programming, in that space if that's the direction we want to go. I don't know. I don't know if others have any thoughts about that or any comments on anything related to this.
I guess just a comment the only thing in front of me was the proposal. So at first glance, it looked to me more like role confusion rather than, everything I've heard here tonight. And Pat, I want to thank you that history is helpful.
Yeah, I've been on the select board 7 years, and I've asked a number of times why we have a Memorial Hall committee, because it hasn't apparently been active in the 7 years that I've been involved, which is concurrent with what's Pat's saying.
I mean, you may know more than I do. I'm not even sure what the term limits are on those committee members, but we certainly haven't reappointed any in years and years. So
True.
I'm not even sure if there's anyone technically still on the Memorial
True.
Hall committee.
Right, if they've not been reappointed when their terms are up. Yeah. So I don't know what do folks think. Do we want to make a decision tonight? Do we want to think about it? Do we want to get more input? Do we want to consider budgeting for it when?
I'm open to the programming aspect of a committee, but I think it, like you said, it should be part of our budgeting process. If we're gonna...
We can't hear.
Oh, sorry. I'm in favor of the programming aspect of the committee, but I think it probably, as Andy said, is a good like a discussion to have during the budgeting process, rather than like during just a regular meeting.
But if you dissolve it, you can't bring it back during the budget, right?
We could form a new committee whenever we want. Yeah, we could. Or just leave it in place and dormant until the time that it has a budget attached to it, if that's the direction we want to go, because we're going to have a lot of budget pressures on us for other reasons in the coming years as well. So it's gonna sit into the enormity of our priority list, not just the potentially emotional aspect of this particular committee. Any thoughts?
Could we leave it dormant, and then when budgeting season comes around,
have the discussion about whether to fund it,
whether we're going to truly fund it as a real committee and change the scope of the committee, as Tracy mentioned, get the scope a little tighter around it.
I would imagine there's no cost to leaving an empty committee on the books.
No, there's no cost to that. There's, as mentioned a couple times, there are several people who are interested in joining the committee. I don't know if you want to interview them now or not now, but in the near future, and in terms of charging them with putting together a new mission statement. I do still have concerns about staff time. It's not just 1 hour a month. It's the prep work that goes into putting out packets. It's the staff support to get those packets posted on our website, to research grants, to go after and basically do the work and tasks that are assigned from a committee, which can take hours a month. Depends on month to month sometimes, but it's not a small task by any means. But yeah, just wanted to point out there that there is some interest, and you may have people who might want to reconsider the mission and propose that before budget season.
We are right before budget, right? Yep. In order to have something to talk about it during budget season, you'd have to have a proposal to talk about, right? Well, we're also talking later on the agenda about adding potentially more joint meetings with the trustees. So we're piling meetings on meetings here. So
I think my preference would be to leave it as is for now. And I'd really like to have a larger overarching discussion about our committee structure and how people are appointed, how people are, how outreach is done in order to gain interest and experience from our own committee on those, from our own community on those committees, excuse me. So I think that would be my preference.
I like that idea, Tracy.
Right, with the upcoming implementation of stipends for committee members, I think we need to have that, we should have that discussion as part of that as well anyway, so. So is it, I'm feeling there may be a consensus to leave the committee dormant for now until we have conversation about how we want to deal with committees in general, and then potentially, and the risk though is then it's July now, we're going to talk about budgets in November, you know, having, you know, if we get to the place where we want to rejuvenate this committee with a budget, I don't know that there's time to do it this year. And so we're leaving it dormant for yet another year unless we, you know, budget in anticipation of coming up with a programming methodology.
I mean, in frankness, it's been dormant for 6 years,
Yeah,
so if it's
yeah.
going to hold off for one more year.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt anything. Any concerns from staff about just not doing anything with it?
It's dormant now.
Yeah.
If it's staying dormant, and what I'm hearing is having a conversation about committees in general, but if we come back to just this one, if we could talk about, give us a little bit of time to talk about a focus.
Yeah.
Not so much the building or the grounds themselves, but the use of the building and some of the expertise that we have in the community, then that time could be well spent. So
okay.
we can look at that, and then I would also be looking for the town's recreation department to be part of that discussion. For those who don't know, the town's recreation department is about 4 full-time people. One being the director and a program director. So when we talk about time, it wasn't necessarily going to be myself or Greg on this committee. It was going to be the recreation department, who also does a lot of the recreation that is not being done by the village, whether it's team sports or the pools or etc. So, but yes, I think if it's going to be dormant, we could bring it back for a discussion in the future and a budget for focusing it.
Okay, everybody okay with that? See nods all around. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Discussion and potential action on public forums and Town of Essex planning in response to Village of Essex Junction's Independence Initiative. Heard that one?
Go ahead, Greg. You want
Oh,
to
yeah.
start this?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm good. You stepping
Go,
up?
you go ahead. I got to step 1 second.
Make sure you can get behind me. So yes, your last meeting, you discussed holding some public forums later on this summer, facilitated by Jen Nauer, who we've worked with in the past, around the issue of what should the future of Essex look like for the town of Essex. Merger has failed. Maybe there's some lessons learned there. Learning about goals behind the village, independent separation effort, but basically as the town select board, hearing from your entire community and all of your residents of Essex about what should the town of Essex do going forward.
I'm getting some of these from the audience that they can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'll try to speak up. So the idea was to have some forums about what the future of the town of Essex should hold, what it should look like, how the town of Essex as a corporate municipal entity should handle the Village of Essex Junction's potential separation independence effort. In speaking to Jen Nauer, Jen really felt like there needs to be something for people to react to, a plan to look at, a plan to provide feedback on. She convinced staff of the same. Rather than having just an open-ended, what do people want? We wanted to give something that people could react to and respond to. So in the memo that's part of your packets, it lays out options of what the select board can do, how it can frame some of these discussions going forward. Looking at the future in 3 phases: an interim phase, a transition phase, and a long-term phase. The interim phase basically being now. There's a separation effort in taking place in the village. We don't know what the future brings as far as governance. We don't know what the legislature will do if the village vote passes to separate and create an independent City of Essex Junction. If it does pass, if the legislature does pass the independent city, there would be a transition phase of the date of that approval versus and then the date of when the independent city takes effect and it's created and it becomes its own thing. And then the long-term phase is after that in terms of what happens well into the future. I wouldn't focus too much on that at this point. But building the forums largely around this interim phase and into the transition phase, with the idea of providing structure for the town in the village to see what it can do going forward, how to protect the town of Essex as a corporate entity, but also not interfere with the village's independence effort, separation effort. So I'll get into the options a little bit. The idea behind them being to accomplish what the town select board has been trying to do for the past several years and well beyond that too. In terms of providing good governance, high quality service, looking at tax equity for all of your residents. And there's a few different ways to look into those things. In this interim phase, and this is, again, these are options. This is not a prescribed, this is what you must do and you have to do, but it's areas to consider and things to present to your residents and public so you can get feedback and formulate a more specific plan and provide more stability to yourselves, to your staff, to your residents in terms of what the future might bring, what it might hold. As far as tax equity, some areas you can look at are staff. We have staff that are paid for by both entities, the town and the village. Some of them are town staff, some of them are village staff. The cost is split between the town and the village. Putting some of those costs into the town budget would take a step towards tax equity where everybody's paying once for staff who provide services to the entire community. It also sets up the budget for the town where if the village does separate and you lose 42% of your tax base off your grand list, it's a little bit more of that money is in the town budget. People know what they're paying for. You can have a bigger discussion about where you may need to save some costs or cut some money or spend some more money to keep providing those high quality services that people have expected. Public safety is another issue. Police are already paid for by the entire community. Essex Rescue is paid for. It's a contribution from the Town of Essex budget, which is paid for by everybody in the community. Fire is the one that is not. The village has its own fire department. The town has its fire department. And they provide mutual aid to each other, but everybody in town pays for the town fire department, which focuses primarily on the town outside the village. Only the village pays into the fire budget, village fire budget, excuse me. So you could handle that similar to potentially how you handle highway transfers within the village, where the village has its highway budget. It's paid for through the entire town budget, and the town reimburses the village the cost of that. That way, everybody in town pays equally for pays for highway services. That's another option for the fire or public safety. And capital budget is another option. The town collects about $536,000 a year through its 2-cent capital tax. I'd say the majority of that money is spent in the town outside the village. So you could have discussions about should some of that money be transferred back into the village as the Village of Essex Junction corporate municipality, or should it be shared and take a look at capital planning and put some more village-based projects into the capital plan. There's different ways to do that. Different costs associated with all of those things. Shared services as well. Both boards have met now and discussed what services, what departments they would like to share, short-term, long-term, into the future, and to not share. So having discussions about what the two boards think makes sense based on input from your residents in terms of what doesn't make sense to share going forward. If the village separates and becomes the independent city of Essex Junction. What the boards haven't really discussed yet is how to share the cost and oversight of those departments. So you can also discuss with the trustees in this short-term interim phase and hear from your residents in terms of how should cost sharing take place. Using the police as an example, it's not just a X million dollars for the police and split it however you want to split it. You also need to factor in the IT support that police gets, the HR support, the manager support, all these other costs that are associated with departments, whether it's police or others. But starting to have those conversations with the board of trustees about what that might look like and base it around some input from your residents in terms of what departments might make sense to share based on how your residents feel. Revenue is another one that you can start talking about now in this interim phase and proposing some options to residents. Again, preparing the town for the possibility that it might lose 42% of its property tax base. How are you going to keep paying for the services that you get? It's not as simple as the population being cut in half, so the budget gets cut in half using rough numbers. Our budget is based on the miles of roads, paved and unpaved. It's based on the network IT infrastructure that's in place, on and on and on. It's not just the people, it's also the systems, the places, the land that gets factored into budgets. So to continue to pay for all that, options are to, or to not. One option is to reduce your budget and cut some services. And have discussions about what that might look like. If you want to keep the services that you're used to, you could increase property taxes. You could pursue a local options tax to raise more money. You can raise fees like we talked about earlier tonight with ComDev. Starting to think about those options and what makes sense for the residents and the public. What are palatable for them, to what extent. That's the rundown of the interim phase, the next few months leading up to November and potentially past November, waiting for a legislative decision, assuming the village voters vote for an independent city and separation from the town of Essex. If that happens, the transition phase is, after, like I said, it's after the legislature approves the independent city of Essex Junction, but before that takes effect. That's when you can start to hammer out the staffing, the service levels. What's the budget going to look like for Town of Essex that is smaller than it once was, and in terms of taking steps to prepare for that, whether that's a hiring freeze, whether it's starting to prepare use of fund balance, unassigned fund balance to ease any tax shift or tax burden, increase of taxes, local options tax is still an option at that point if not implemented yet. And finalizing any contracts, memorandums of understanding with the new independent city council to see what services, shared services might look like. So that's the gist of it. Building the forums around those options, around that plan, around that future, to start to hear from residents what of those make sense. What do they like? What do they not like? Again, there might be some lessons learned about why merger didn't pass, but to Tracy's point at our last meeting, looking towards the future, what does the future of the town of Essex look like from staff's perspective? These are the options you need to consider and the things that you need to hear from your residents about. So happy to hear and take any input now. Jen's recommendation, which I think is a great one, is to meet with the trustees about this probably next week if things go well and you're willing to do that time-wise and get their input. Again, this isn't meant to stop separation. It's not meant to disrupt it, but getting some input from the trustees to see, is there anything in here that causes a disruption that gets in the way, that impedes separation? That's not the goal. That's not the intent. And then based on any of that feedback from the trustees, scheduling some public forums in August to hear from your residents.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Any board questions, comments?
So this is your proposal for the public meeting. Is that what you're saying?
It's a
So it
framework
would
for
be-
discussion.
So it would be done like in a breakout group type forum?
We'll be working out the logistics with Jen in terms of what to expect, how to expect. She wanted to get some feedback from tonight, and so did staff in terms of what what we can build it around based on your input. Part of it's going to depend on how many people we get. Kind of thinking 2, maybe 3 forums, different times, different places, throughout town, and trying to reach different people. So
My concern is I just want to make sure we don't limit people's participation. If they've got other ideas, we need to have to allow that time to hear those different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's too structured, we're gonna shut down free flow conversation. That makes sense?
Yeah. I think, if you don't mind, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
That's the entire balance. We have no idea how many people will show up on any given night. And so the process is to give them some structure, and hear and participate. But we really want is, what are your priorities? From one perspective, if the select board's position is we're not fighting the separation process per se, but you are looking at it, if it's successful, what does the town look like? What do you want it to look like? And what are we going to do about the monetary change from the public perspective in order to guide you? You're not saying that not necessarily that you agree with the village, that you think it's going to be successful in the legislature, any of that stuff. But the listening, the going out there, who shows up, how you follow up on it, that's what we're talking about.
Okay. And my only other recommendation is if you're, depending on how many we do, nights are great, but I think a weekend one would be good too.
Yep.
I will throw this out. You may do your 3 or whatever you do, and then you decide that maybe one more or another way, or you decide, again, it may either be before November, it could be after November, but listening to the public in different formats and different places is what's important.
Right.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I was trying to wrap my brain around this. I'm not sure why I had a problem doing that. And I don't want to micromanage Jen in any way. That's not my intent. But I see this in 2 phases. One is, the timeline I think is helpful for folks to wrap their heads around, when things would happen, which pieces are in play at that time. But also moving into a second phase where you're talking about, these are the options that exist, and getting feedback on those individual options, and also having an other category, as Dawn said, to collect ideas, new ideas, things we may not have thought about up until now, and just, again, sit and listen. And I also would not be in favor of letting this languish. I think we run the risk of, I call it analysis paralysis. If we have a discussion about having a discussion only to have the discussion, I would be fine with approving this now, so that we can get that approval and get that scheduling going.
Thanks, Tracy. Any comments, Vince? Pat? Okay, so what are you looking for from us tonight?
I guess the biggest question would be direction of, do you want us to put this on the joint agenda on next Monday, the 19th, to present it to the trustees and see if there's anything in here that we haven't considered that impedes their own work? Or do you want to just move ahead to Tracy's point and start scheduling the forums? You've already given us the go-ahead to work with Jen at the last meeting, so we're good there. It's just a question of what, you want to take an interim step or just schedule the forums?
I think given the time constraint, we should go ahead and schedule the forums and get started. Because something else may come up that we're not even aware of yet. I mean, the trustees are doing their own separate investigation, and they're going to share with us what they need. So maybe if we hear from the public what we need, so that we have a, ongoing two-way conversation with them.
Just for the sake of, I'll go either way. It's
Yeah,
it's
I
one
just-
more it's one more week. It's a gesture to the trustees that you're willing to take their input on it. They are doing their own project, and it's a question of how much do you want to make this yours, and how much do you want to get some additional input. Like I say, I'm fine either way. That's just for the sake of discussion.
Yeah, I just wondering if before we go further, should we listen to public comment?
Andy, I can't hear you.
So I was asking the board whether they thought we should ask for public comment at this point or have further discussion among ourselves.
I'd like to hear from the public.
Yeah, I think that's, since it seems we've heard from everybody, let's do that. Okay. Start in the room this time again. Betsy. Smaller chair at the microphone.
For a smaller person. Betsy Dunn. Number one, the trustees were very carefully worded to us and said they don't want to have any meetings with us anymore. So why are we doing that? I don't understand it. And why, what's impeding them that we're doing to them? We're just carrying on with our regular everyday basis. And they are crafting their own city. And I don't feel that we have to give them any money or take on the responsibility for their staff. At this point, they're separating. Let them separate. If that's what they want, I'm for it. And us taking on the tax burden, why? We have a budget that's set until 23. And we've already said that. This is where we are. And yes, I do think that we do have to look at what does separation mean for the town. I do agree with that. And I think that the town needs to come out and talk about what is our vision of who we are. And without the junction as part of us, and that's okay. But I think we need to have people who are going to be on this board, because we're going to need, if it passes through, we're going to need to have our own charter alterations and changes, because we need to then look at where are we picking our people from who are going to be sitting on this board. And I personally, and no offense to Pat, but I don't want a person from the village sitting on our board when we are deciding our future. I think that that's wrong, because he is a village person. And we need to have a full contingent of people who are in the town outside of the village, who are making those decisions. That's my perspective. And I totally understand that he is here and we can't ask him to resign, as much as I might want to. And I think that we have to look at what's the best for the town. And if it doesn't pass, then we have to look at the potential for making our town more responsive by having a commission finance to look at districts so that we can have a better governance of this community. That's where I think we have to go, and I think we should look at that soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Anybody else in the room? Barbara.
Barbara Higgins, 7 Cindy Lane. What concerns me about this proposal is that while the Village of Essex Junction voters have had an advisory vote, there hasn't been a single vote of the Town of Essex, advisory or otherwise, whether separation is where this community wants to go. It may be that the entire community
even people outside the Village of Essex Junction, are interested in separation. I know there are some. It perplexes me that we have spent, we meaning our representatives, have spent so many months sitting back and being driven by another board. That board does a very good job representing their constituency. I truly do not believe that this board has given the same kind of effort to representing the rest of us who would become the town of Essex. While we remain the town of Essex, including the Village of Essex Junction, you clearly have a responsibility to provide service to all citizens. But when you are talking about a future town of Essex that does not include the residents of the Village of Essex Junction, to include them in a decision about what the governance will be for those people seems absurd to me. I understand that all of us must contribute to providing a view of what a transition period, should a separation occur, might look like. It certainly is not the purview of the Village of Essex Junction resident, once separation is voted on and approved by the Select Board, to determine the outcome of the rest of us. I have been a Select Board member. I understand my duty. Your duty is to make the town of Essex, whether it is now that includes the village or in the future without the village, a strong, viable entity. I understand the staff's need to look to the future, but it seems to me we're jumping ahead of ourselves. There hasn't been a vote by the Village of Essex Junction. I think there's plenty. I know you feel like there's not enough time, but I think there's really plenty of time once there's a vote to decide whether or not you need to do some of these things. If you want to ask people, if you want to inform people about what this community might look like separated, that's fine and dandy. But asking us about something we don't know if it's going to happen for maybe a year or more, because we don't even know when the legislature might take it up, even if it's voted for, I think you're wasting a lot of people's time and creating a lot of anxiety that's unnecessary and should be better directed at continuing to serve the people we have now, and let a board, should separation go forward, we would have to have a new board, and those people should be talking with the residents of whoever that new community is about what they want their community to be. Unless you're going to have a vote on separation and everybody votes on separation, then there's a different story here and a different view to how we could move forward. I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Barbara. Irene. Remember to
Thank
speak
you.
loudly.
Irene Renner, Rush Lane. Thank you to Barbara Higgins for coming tonight, former Select Board Chair, and she's done her time around this table for sure and knows what she's talking about. I'm incredibly dismayed by the negative language I hear around this. When I go to the trustee meetings, they're positive, they're psyched about separation, they're looking to do separation the best they can. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not talking about the benefits of separation for the new town of Essex? Why are we talking about cost of the TOV, reduction? It's just this heavy load, and it's exhausting to hear you talk about this, staff especially. I believe you remember that you're village residents, but not that you remember that you're residents of the town. Because I hear you talking about we have to implement it a lot. Oh my gosh, we have to increase taxes. We would have to increase fees. All this doom and gloom language. It's really disheartening. I want to get excited about separation as the town. And I want you to talk about things, not tax equity, because we just voted no on merger twice. And I think you might remember because it was just in March and April that we did that. We do not need to see a plan for tax equity in this conversation with the public. They have weighed in, thank you, and they told us what they think. What you didn't put in here was interesting, isn't it? The district representation that people said over and over again in merger surveys, in the 3+3 vote, somehow equal representation didn't get into this plan. It still hasn't been implemented in this room. We still don't have 5 people from outside the village represented during any of these conversations. It's mind-blowing to me how many times the public says to you, we need district representation. We don't need the village's version of tax equity, and yet it shows up in this 4-page document. Why add meetings with the trustees? I agree with the comments that I just heard from certain select board members. The trustees don't belong meeting with you about this. They're doing their thing. You should do our thing. What's the greater good for the town of Essex? I want to hear some positive language, and I want to hear some new ideas. We have a village highway tax that just ended on June 30th of this year. That highway tax could be incrementally increased to pay for the town fire department, the town rec department, the town planning department, and the town library. And that's all you need to do to make the taxes equitable. That's all you need to do. You don't need to be shuffling money by the millions from our taxpayers to the village who would have oversight on how it's spent. That's unacceptable. Our town tax dollars belong in the town.
Irene, are you
Thank
talking about the proposed?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce, go ahead. Remember to speak loudly.
I will. I went to Bruce Post, 1 Cindy Lane. I went to Norwich University. I was in the Corps of Cadets. They used to say I used to count cadence for the Corps because I had a loud voice. But hopefully people can hear me. Okay. I mean, this is a very strange situation we're in. I mean, I went on the website for Our Village, Our Voice. I think that's what Our Village, Our Voices, and it's creative. It's putting forward their plan. There's a book that was written about people who stayed in Chelsea once we had the great migration that went out west. It was called Those Who Were Left Behind. And that's who I'm going to be. If there is separation, there are going to be 11,000 people who have been left behind. And I don't want to wait until that may happen to begin to have those discussions among us who live outside the village. I know we say, but I'm a member of the town too in the village, but I can't separate myself from the fact that there's a significant body of opinion that says we want to leave the town of Essex. And there is an opinion on the Board of Trustees that only village members can make that decision for an entire town. They're going to say, we're going to separate, and I don't have a voice in saying no or yes. So if that's going to be the case, I think we should, at least part of this should be directed towards engaging people who live outside the village to talk about the implications of this and to talk about how we might like to go forward. And I do agree with Irene on the you said a couple weeks ago, we don't know why merger failed. Greg, please. You're too professional not to know why. There are 2 issues: taxes, tax equity, and a big issue was multiple district representation. It came out in the survey, it came out in the focus groups, and people wanted that. People in the focus groups said, we want to get beyond this he said, she said, Hatfields and McCoys, town, village, TIV, TOV, or whatever it is. We want to begin to do that. And I'll never forget the night when Dave Treston from KSV presented the findings to the governance committee. And what did one of the members say? My great takeaway is that people want economic development. And the consultant pushed back. You know, one definition of consultant is they steal your watch and then they tell you the time. Well, this guy said, no, you've got to realize it. This is important to people. And I think in their survey, they also said that at least maybe about 10% of the people who lived outside the village who were opposed to merger felt they would reconsider their vote against merger towards supporting it if they had this kind of representation. So in a way, that was an own goal by some of the people who didn't want to do this kind of thing. So if the village is going to proceed, I really do feel I want to have a voice in the new town of Essex. I've looked at the history of these different proposals, and there's the new city of Winooski, but there was the new town of Colchester. You had the same thing happening in Brattleboro. This doesn't happen very much. And one of the differences between Winooski in those days and today was Winooski was dominant in 1921 with 5,200 people, and Colchester had about 1,900. Here we have a community that's basically 11,000 outside, 11,000 inside, but only 11,000 are going to have a voice, according to the opinion of the trustees. Only 11,000 people will be able to decide that this town of 22,000 should dissolve. Well, I'd like a voice too. If not on separation, I want to start talking about the new town of Essex and what we can do and the things we should know. And I think some of us are frustrated about this. You know, we're public citizens who talk about things. We do talk. There are 4 people here from Cindy Lane tonight. Can you imagine? But we talk about these things, and I'm proud we talk about them. It doesn't make me feel good at night sometimes when I go to sleep because I get wound up. That's me. But this is why when I first heard the conversation, why did merger fail? And then I saw this proposal, it almost seemed to me like a bait and a switch. And so now you're hearing from me and a few others who say, don't forget the other 11,000 people who may be left holding the bag.
Yeah, so Bruce, the intent here is to set up, what we're talking about is setting up the forums to allow those discussions, to allow you to have those, to tell us those things.
But what I'm saying though is, Andy, that we can't pretend that the 11,000 people in the village are going to have the same views about a potential new town of Essex than those of us who live outside the boundaries of the village. And I think you have to engage those people as well, and not in some big mass, because there are going to be different points of view. I would find it hard to think that I could live in the village and be for separation, but when I'm put on my town resident hat, I'd be. We just can't pretend that kind of a dichotomy exists in a person. So that's what I'm trying to stress. There has to be a component where the 11,000 who live outside the village have an opportunity to have a voice of their own. There you go.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Gabrielle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's actually really heartening to hear from everyone here tonight. I think that kind of passion is what is going to help us all get through this one way or the other.
Bruce says he's having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, Bruce. That's okay. I'll do my best. I normally have a very loud speaking voice, so I'll do my best. Thanks, Bruce. I have been giving this so much thought because it's so important for all of those folks who may be the town of Essex after separation to have a chance to figure out what that means. That's really new and different in some ways. And yet, until that whole transition period is over, I am you, right? I mean, I'm all of you. And on one hand, a part of me wants very much for the town who will be the future town of Essex, to have a chance to have those conversations. And I agree completely with Bruce. I don't know how I'm in those conversations in a constructive way. I don't know how I would do that. That's my honest answer. And yet I struggle with the idea that there could be Town of Essex public forums to which I'm not invited nor welcome nor useful. But we're in strange times. So I think that what I would say tonight is, as a village and town resident, I'm really open to being as supportive as I can to you all on the select board, supporting the people that you may be serving after separation, to having time. And I think you can't have enough time to have those conversations. I don't think it's a very expensive proposition. I think, is it $3,000? Is that correct?
It's an estimate.
Give or take. If there could possibly be room for conversations that potentially town residents would have, so that, you know, this is not a done deal for a long time, right? We'll vote November 2nd, but Dylan rules. So this is still a long ways away. So I think that conversations about the future of the town of Essex are still relevant to have with village residents in some way. I think Jen could certainly do a good job of constructing something where there's an opportunity for there to be sessions that are potentially in separate rooms or separate in some way. So I just want to say how much I support what I'm hearing tonight, and support all of you. And finally, I would say I'm very opposed to any proposal that would disallow town residents in the current town of Essex who pay taxpayer dollars from running for and serving on this board. I think that's really inappropriate. I think it sounds illegal to me. I appreciate that people don't feel comfortable that there could be a town resident who lives inside the village on this on the select board while these are happening, but that is what is right and fair. As a taxpayer, I should have every right to run for this group and serve on the select board. Yeah, on that I don't feel too much flexibility, but on the other one I do, and I really appreciate that you all are considering doing this amidst a lot of other competing things on your plate. I think it is really important. I think that your community has a lot of things that they need to say to each other and to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Ken Signorillo.
And Signorello. So there's just one paragraph in this document that really bothers me. The public forum has two primary objectives. First, to present the plan so that residents, staff, and boards can know what to expect during each phase with regards to shared services and operational planning. So there's already a plan. I'm kind of surprised to hear that, actually. I would hope that the forum's purpose would be to consider possible solutions to the problems that separation might present. You know, it's like an asteroid that's headed for Earth. We think it might hit, we're not sure. We'll know soon, and then after we know, we'll have a year and a half to prepare. So how much time should we spend now, assuming that it's definitely going to hit? I think that at this point, a list of the problems that separation will present certainly is appropriate to consider. Only a list of the problems, not the solutions. The fact that there's a plan to be considered at this forum is kind of surprising to me. Second, to ask residents what they are paying attention to during each phase with regards to level of service, expectations, and costs, and tax equity. Again, tax equity. We have tax equity. All taxpayers are paying taxes that they voted for. We have tax equity. Use that term is gaslighting. It is trying to fool people into thinking that they're getting something that they don't deserve. So the rationale is to provide stability and predictability in town operations and services while the independent city of Essex Junction is in development of their and upon consideration. So once we know that it passes, we'll have at least a year and about a half to prepare. We'll have identified the problems. I think 2 forums to do that makes very good sense. And then after that, once it's obvious that separation is going to happen, at least the vote, maybe not the legislature approval, start looking at the solutions and ask the public what they would like for the solutions instead of telling them, here's the plan. What do you think? Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Barbara, you already spoke. Yes.
Barbara Higgins, I wanted to clarify so that I think Gabrielle was perhaps misunderstanding my comment about a board that didn't include village residents. My point was that a board, once separation had been approved and there was new governance, would be elected, and that board during the transition period would make determinations for the new Town of Essex. I was not suggesting that a board totally of town outside the village would run the transition. Rather, that board would take on the responsibility for putting together all the necessary charters, activities, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay, I see one hand up on the computer. Are there any other hands in the room? I think almost everybody has spoken. Okay. I see Andy Champagne. Andy, please keep your comments civil if you can.
I will try if you don't piss me off. I'm not the only one who's getting wound up here. If you look at Patty's camera, her eyes are glued to the video. I must point out the Town of Essex didn't vote on separation. The board didn't authorize any funds for separation. You don't have the authorization to talk about it. Standard response should be, we can't talk about separation. You vote separate, we'll give you a date when services will be cut. Have a nice day. I also do not like how much the staff gets to talk. They should not be talking or giving opinions. We should be telling them what we want, and they should be giving us options on how to do it. I smell a half-assed political move here. The staff who live in the village are hoping to get people outside the village to agree with separation, and they are running the meetings, and if not, they are going to frame it that way. The town manager has $19 million budget who can't set up a room so people can hear. Why are you talking to that guy? The staff should not run it. Of course, a public relations committee would be helpful here. It sounds a lot more important than your tree committee or whatever the heck you call it.
Andy, you're muted. I don't know if somebody muted you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, thanks. All right, bring it back to the board. I heard a couple things there. There were comments about whether there's any opportunity for discussions to include folks that live outside the village during some of these forums. I don't know if that's part of the plan.
Yeah, whenever you're done.
And then that's one thing I heard. The other is representation. I'm personally, and maybe I shouldn't be speaking first. I should let you guys talk.
You started.
Yeah, sorry. Personally, I don't want to get into a round and round discussion about 3+3 during this because I think it could chew up a lot of time. We are pursuing 3+3. I'm talking with I need to set up a meeting with Pat and I and the legislative group to figure out what next steps are on that. But again, I completely understand that a future Town of Essex may be appropriate to have districts within it. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe now is the time to complicate the whole question and add that in. But we are still having the discussions. The other piece that plays a little bit into this is the redistricting, but that just draws other arbitrary lines that may not be relevant to this discussion. So those are the thing. I heard a question about whether we could have town only discussions, town outside the village only discussions. I'm sorry, there. I prefer not to convolute representation at this point, although it could come out as an important thing and maybe it needs to be included. I can be wrong. Another point I want to make is that this is not a mandated plan. This is just as Greg said at the beginning, this is a discussion starting point. The document that was included in the packet. I, for one, fully intend to listen to everything that's said, take it to heart, and try to consider it and see where we can go. If there's something that's totally off base in that proposal, and again, it's just a proposal. And there may have been a few other things that I've forgotten. Hopefully, others' comments will jar them loose.
Yeah, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
going, I don't want to jump the board. But okay.
Did you have a clarification for something that I said, or otherwise?
A little bit. I need to report back to Jen now or tomorrow and tell
Right.
her on how this is going to look. So this has actually been very helpful. Thank you all for your comments and feedback, and it's helped me focus a little bit. I want to try to clarify a few things and make sure the board's comfortable with what I'm hearing from the public and how to report back to Jen. These forums were not just about why merger failed. It was not the discussion last week. It was part of it. It was part of the memo. It was part of the conversation tonight and lessons learned, but it's also about looking forward. That's always been part of these discussions. What is the future for the town of Essex? And I apologize for any confusion for plan options is what I should have said as opposed to just plan. So apologize for missing a word there and confusing any, causing any confusion there. What I'm hearing, what I've heard from the residents, what I want to propose to the select board and take back to Jen is that, to me, I was kind of looking at the interim and the transition phase as kind of lumped in, and I'm thinking they're separate. The interim phase is more about, we don't know if separation is going to happen. We don't. So what can the town select board do for the town of Essex right now until there's a vote? You have to put together budgets. You have to make decisions. What sort of input do you want from all of your residents in terms of what that looks like? Maybe that's the focus of a couple of forums, or maybe that's just the only focus right now. The transition phase is more when you know what's going to happen if there's a separation vote. And that's, I don't think right now the select board, I don't think you can bar anybody from coming to these meetings, but I would suspect that if you have a decision that the separation is happening and there's going to be an independent city of Essex Junction, the people who are concerned about the town of Essex are the people left behind, for lack of a better phrase. And those are the people who are probably going to self-select into looking at what is the future of the town of Essex for the remaining 11,000 people who make up the town of Essex. So I guess what I'm getting at is trying to figure out, does the board want to focus and want Jen to focus on just the interim phase right now? And the decisions you have to make in the near future in the coming weeks and months? Or do you want to focus on both at two different forums? I guess at what point do you want to bring in the transition phase into hearing from the public?
Comments?
If you don't need to do transition if it doesn't pass, is that correct? So that could be held off until after their vote.
You don't know how long the transition period might be, is the only potential risk there, but it's the interim is that's now. Interim phase is now.
I just want to hear people's thoughts and stuff. Basically, where to go from here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just what does the future of Essex look like to you? Right? I mean,
I don't know, my comments welcome.
Well, yeah. Part of the board, I hope so.
I mean,
But,
come on.
but truthfully, that's what I want to know is where do we go from here? And I think that's really what Jen needs to focus on, hearing both sides. Especially, if like Gabby said, her team is working great and they're going ahead, but maybe there's some other people in the village that were opposed to separation. We need to hear all of this before we really can look to where we go and to plan for the future. I don't know. That's what I'd like to hear.
And Jen wants to be able to propose and present the framework and the options
Right.
of where you can go from here.
Right. And I don't know if the way you've broken it down is going to get us there or if we need to look at it. Not so many steps. That's my only.
At the risk of complicating things or simplifying things at the moment, if all you want to do is hold a public forum that's open-ended, we don't need Jen for that. But if you want to take a look at some of the options that staff thinks you need to consider for the town of Essex, then we can, Jen can work a forum around that.
So what would happen if we held a public forum for their input first and then had Jen do the second one where you have given us due guidance or not? Or is that not going to work because there's going to be too much chaos? Okay. I just throwing it out there.
I think that if you hold a public forum that doesn't have any structure, you are opening up to chaotic. I won't say chaos, but chaotic and not much direction. Whereas our feedback from a person who does strategic planning is give some people something to react to and get that focused feedback versus all over. And I now stepped over
Sorry.
Pat.
that's fine.
And he was
Yeah, Pat, go ahead.
So I think it has to be focused until we know what happens with the legislature, only on what we're seeing going forward, the transition period. And I actually agree with Betsy on this part, because if this passes and gets to the legislature, I wouldn't run for the select board again. It just wouldn't make sense. My voice would not be needed in part of that future community. But until that point, I will sit at this table and I will represent the 11,000 people in the junction who only have me sitting here as a select board. And that's not what I'm hearing from a lot of people in the comments tonight. So not only them, but I also have the rest of the town to consider as well. So we need to, I mean, I don't see that there's really a discussion past that point with Jen. I think it has to be focused only on that period between now until when we find out for sure whether or not the legislature is going to pass or not. Because if it doesn't, then we're all stuck with one another. And we've got to figure out a way to get past all of the bitterness and the anger. And we've got to figure out a way to deal with this whole equity question. I heard what you said, but my response to that would be, yes, we all voted on a budget, but say the citizens who live in the village feel that it's unfair and vote it down. As a select board, we have to come back with a new budget, but the ratios cannot change. We have no mechanism. There's no way that we can then adjust the budget to say, village, you're paying for 100% of your fire department and 42% of the other fire department as well. We don't think that's fair. Let's vote it down. When we come back as a select board to present it, there's no other mechanism. It's just how it works right now. Short of creating new taxation districts or tax plans that shade similar to the town highway tax that just ended, that we tried to avoid because it was complicated and confusing and it created bitterness. Did it?
This is
no, but
it's not a discussion.
But the point is that there's no mechanism like that for residents who feel as if they labor under tax inequity. There's just not. And that's what we've been trying to get through for a long time. And if this separation movement fails, is voted down in November, or doesn't get past the legislature, then we still need to move forward. And we need to figure out what moving forward looks like. So that's what I feel like these discussions need to be centered around completely.
Vince, any thoughts?
I personally think we're doing a disservice to everyone who lives in the town if we don't, especially the TOV, if we don't plan for what happens, success or failure. I think that both that, like, that needs to be, we need to plan for that. We need to plan for both eventualities, or at least get information on what we as a board should be doing for both outcomes of a vote or of the legislature. You know, we can talk about if an asteroid's going to hit us or not, but you know, I still want to be building rockets that can go up and move it out of the way, whether I know it's going to hit me or not. If it's not a, you know, I'm not saying it's a definite, or if it's not a definite, or it is a possibility. It is something on the horizon, and I think that we're doing a disservice to everyone in the town if we're not looking at both paths and taking real and serious objective looks at what both paths lead us to as a town. That's my piece.
Thanks, Vince. Tracy, any thoughts?
Ditto. But yes, I agree. However, my question is, if we focus on everything up until the transition phase, given that budget cycles are what budget cycles are we behind in planning if we don't include that? I think the answer is no, that we will still have a chunk of time in order to adjust and in order to plan, but I just want to make sure that we're not cutting something off that we really should have at least on the peripheral.
I'll answer that. I don't know. Because I cannot tell you what the state legislature is going to do. Generally, one would think they would make an effective date July 1, which would be the first day of a new budget year for a municipality. But when are they going to approve it? And for which July 1? So I cannot tell you. I would hope you'd get 2 budget seasons, but I don't know. And so that's why staff is looking at this and saying, obviously, more time is more beneficial for both parties, but certainly for the town to have more budget seasons to make adjustments. But I don't know.
And I guess in some respects, it makes sense not to try to eat the elephant all at once. And I would agree with, you know, let's just get the feedback. Let's get what people think up until that transition phase, and we can, you know, adjust and change course and tack, as it were, you know, as we go.
And I'll just add, I'll echo everything, ditto everything Evan said. But the one addition being that what you do in the interim phase, the now, before you have an answer on the transition, can set you up better for the transition. And it can make transitions easier. It can make decisions easier. So it's a question of how much you want to do that, how much of that you want to do now in this interim phase.
So it's sounding like the question is how far into the future do these forums go?
Mr. Chair, can I add
Yeah,
one
go
more
ahead,
thing?
go
And I
ahead.
think we've said this before, but when we talk about, and when I say we all talk about the best interests of the town of Essex, which currently has roughly 21,000, 22,000 people, just for easy math, I'll just call it 10,500 and 10,500. 10,500 in the village, 10,500 outside of the village. When we look at this and we say, I have no idea if the state will approve this, I will assume the village could get more than 50% to say yes. I'll assume they can. Assuming they do, I have no idea what the state will do. I have no idea how long the state will do it and what they will do, because it's been 100 years since the city of Winooski was created. That being said, our charge is to make sure that the remainder, should it happen, is in the best possible position economically, socially, systems-wise, etc. I'm assuming, and I'm also part of it, the village is doing that on their side. All right, theirs is a little more clear. They have their 10,000. They know what they're trying to achieve. They're looking at it. But again, ours is what happens. One, if there is separation, and two, what if there isn't? And if there isn't, you're back to 21,000 people that are separated in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And the same issues that we had before all this started. That's what we're trying to get at as well. To put you all in the position before or after of what those priorities are and what steps to take. That's what this is about. And we don't vote. This is your vote. This is your charge. But we're here to help you. And that's why we think these forums are part of that process.
All right, so I'm aligned with moving forward to up to the transition question, the interim phase, I guess you're calling it, for these forums as well. Because yeah, it makes sense. We may have it's two completely different paths, right? If it depending which way it goes. And why, and how do we put ourselves in the best position, understand what the priorities are, so that either way we can try to go down the right path. All right, do we need to do any kind of vote on this? Is consensus adequate here?
I have the consensus that I should tell Jen, work with Jen to focus on the interim phase, which is the now up until the transition, also known as when the legislature says, yes, you have an independent city. Focus on the interim phase, which is now. I see a lot of nodding heads.
Yep. All right. The other question you asked, Greg, was whether to take this to the trustees next week. But it sounds like you need to tell Jen today or tomorrow. So I'm conflicted on that one.
Well, I can tell her what the board is looking at and the direction you're giving. And then we can either just schedule forums on that, or we can tell the trustees next week, this is what the forums are going to focus on.
Okay, so that the intent of having it in any discussion next week with the trustees is tell them what we're doing, not to get their input on it. Okay, I'm more comfortable with that.
Yeah. I mean, you might get their input of, is this a major hiccup or hurdle or issue with them?
Right.
It's your decision and it's your work.
Right, because there's an agenda item on here, right, where they want us to add additional meetings to work out more details, and we'll have that discussion later. So yeah. Okay. Any other concerns? All right, so let's move on to the next agenda item. Consider approval of tax stabilization agreement with Glavel Incorporated. This has an asterisk for potential executive session, but I think you want to have a discussion first.
Yeah, it's all in the memo here. Most of you have seen this, and Tracy and I spoke a little bit about it already. But Glavel is it's a startup. It's a Burlington-based company. They're an environmentally friendly company. They make construction material from recycled glass. They are relocating to Essex. They're going to have 13 employees. They are committing to having at least 25 of those employees representing the social causes, hiring new Americans, formerly incarcerated individuals, women. They actually hope to bring in more than 25%, but they felt that was a safe starting estimate. The tax stabilization agreement to help them locate, to help them come to Essex and get established here. From the town perspective and the board's perspective, you're offering it's a decent tax stabilization agreement. It's not in the level of like Blodgett, which is the other one that we have, 170 employees and kept them in the area. But it's showing that you're committed to startups, entrepreneurialism, green business, businesses with social causes, and it's front loaded as part of this tax stabilization agreement. No municipal taxes in the first 2 years as kind of that gesture towards startup businesses and recognizing that the hard part for them comes in the beginning, and that's when the costs come. So that's the way it's been structured. And total savings to Glavel, the town would forego about $18,500 total in tax revenue. For those first 4 years, that number will probably go up once the fit up is done on the building. That also means more taxes are going to be coming in for the town once this fit up is done for that building. And once the tax stabilization agreement expires after 4 years, the town would be getting 100% of those municipal taxes. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board?
We talked about them. We
Pat.
talked about them previously to this, didn't we? Like 6 months ago, and these are the numbers that we recommended at that time.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess we did have some public input on this, questioning how a livable wage is defined. Do we have information on that? And their proposal indicates all paid a livable wage, but I'm just wondering if there's some metric that's defined by.
There probably is, and I am not sure what it
I
is.
believe the state has that, but we would have to.
I think it's state based on the region or the county.
Yeah. We would have to double check with the state as to how they define that.
We can write that in. So this is authorizing, the recommendation is to authorize the manager to finalize and execute the contract, so we can make sure that's part of the actual written agreement.
Okay, and I was going to ask if anyone from Glavel was here, and I see someone with their hand up.
That's right. Hi, this is Ken Menkar, so I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Glavel. Yeah, so on the question of livable wage, I don't have the exact figure, but it's we are paying something in the neighborhood of $17 per hour, plus it'll be a 12-hour operation. So there'll be a shift premium for that 12 hours and then an additional premium for the night shift. And just as a data point, happened to see that Global was recruiting for night shift operators, or probably still is. And our planned rate, including the night shift, the 12-hour and the night shift premiums, was identical to the Global. So to the extent that helps at least calibrate, I don't know the actual definition of livable wage, but that sort of gives you a sense of the tier that we're paying our operators.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Do we need to have any discussion in executive session? Or everybody okay with what you've seen?
Yeah, I'm okay. So
okay. So are you looking for a?
So I make the recommendation that we authorize the Unified Manager to execute the tax stabilization agreement with Glavel Incorporated and Allenbrook Development.
second.
Okay, thank you, Don, and thank you, Pat. Just one clarification. You used the word recommend, but I think you want to make the motion.
Make the motion. I'm sorry. That's the select board.
Yep.
That's what I get for reading it. I'm sorry. I make the motion. Yes.
All right.
Corrected.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks for doing business in Essex.
Thank you very much.
We're really excited. Going to get exciting soon.
As the developer, I thank you also. You guys have been.
Oh my goodness.
Oh goodness.
I've been sitting back here waiting for this, but thanks very much for everything you do for us up there. The staff,
everybody, the planning, the zoning has been very, very helpful with a lot of the development that we've been doing up there. So,
We know your name, but for the audience, could you state your name?
yeah, my name is Al Sacco, and I own the property that they'll be leasing. So, I'll work it out. But thank you again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay, moving on to business item 5F, consider approval of additional joint meetings between Select Board and Essex Junction Board of Trustees. So there was a list of meetings that were, well, there was a doodle poll that went out, and a group of meetings were scheduled, meeting notices came out, and then Andrew has asked to add 3 additional meetings.
Correct. We, based on the doodle poll, staff scheduled one joint meeting a month through the end of the year. Andrew Brown, the trustee president, asked for the select board to consider adding 3 additional meetings that had at least 8 members available from between the 2 boards. His reasoning was that they can be canceled more easily than they can be added. Don't have specifics as to what would be on those agendas, but theoretically it's around discussions of the village separation. But beyond that, it's just kind of a placeholder. So that's what's before you.
All right, so go ahead.
We missed the minutes.
I moved them to, I maybe I wasn't clear. Those are next.
Oh, those are next, not
Yeah.
before this
Yeah,
discussion. Oh, sorry. Thought we're moving it before the. Sorry.
So this is the question of whether to add
Oh, I'm
the
ahead
3
of myself.
additional joint meetings. With the discussion previously about not being able to support Memorial Hall Committee, here we are asking for 3 more, but it's their state, could be an argument that there is an argument that they're related to some of our high priority items from the strategic planning, but they also have a potential impact to items on that list as well. So I don't know what folks think about adding yet more meetings.
I think 1 a month is enough without adding the extra 3. And if we dedicate each of those joint meetings to just discussing what they need discussed, if it's separation, not a whole other list of items to take care of, we should be able to accomplish it in each meeting without adding 3 more.
Any other comments?
I personally think we should keep it open. Like keep the 3 meetings there, like open and available to us if we need them.
Tracy, any thoughts?
My thoughts are around staff time. Prior to this point, we were talking about decreasing our meeting schedule. And now we're talking about, last meeting we added a joint meeting a month, and now we're adding more meetings. However, I suppose it is only 3 meetings, and we can cancel them if they're not needed, or we feel as though there isn't anything pertinent to discuss at that time. So I think putting it on the calendar isn't saying, oh yes, absolutely, we will be there. It just gives us the option to be there and use that time. I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
I almost kind of want to take the middle ground here, and that I'm not sure that I can make July 26th, but I would be okay with putting the other 2 on there. Because the July 26th is pretty coming up fast, and I think I have vacation.
I mean, I know when we all talked about this in the planning session we had, we kind of acknowledged that not everyone's going to be able to make every meeting, and we'll have to just settle for a quorum sometimes.
That's a
good point.
So Andrew's, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you have more?
No.
Okay. Andrew's reasoning, I think, for doing this is anticipation of the need for the 2 boards to have discussions about details of what they will be proposing to their residents around separation. And maybe we'll talk about this more in our later agenda item as to what we think we're actually going to be able to resolve in the time frame that they're asking for. One of the concerns I have is there's a set of meetings that are 6 days apart, that if we have a discussion in one meeting, we don't have our own meeting between the two of those to have our own discussion about it. And so then we're having 2 back-to-back meetings without having the ability to meet ourselves in between, without adding yet more meetings. So that's part of why I'm concerned about adding these, is that at least the one that said that's just has a 6-day gap in it. We're not gonna have any opportunity to do anything between those days. Again, without, 3 meetings could quickly turn into 6 meetings in order to respond to something, if that's the intent of the 3 additional meetings. The other question I had for Andrew, and I'm not sure I got the answer was, the question was, who gets to decide whether a meeting is canceled? And his thought was, well, it has to be joint. He says, well, what if one board doesn't want to have the meeting and the other one does? Can you compel another board to attend? Probably not, but so I don't know how we as a group decide whether a meeting is necessary or not. I guess we decided in the prior meeting. Talking myself through this, but
What if there's not a prior meeting? So if we have a joint meeting scheduled for the 19th and then the next one is
the 26th.
The 26th, there's no time or place to cancel that meeting in between.
Right.
So logistically, I don't know where that leaves us.
Yeah.
So to speaking to that example, like if we had a meeting that was 6 days apart, at the first meeting, wouldn't we determine whether that other meeting was useful or not, and then as of 2 boards decide whether we were going to hold that?
And so, well, then would both boards need to agree that it's, if one board thinks, well, we have to have a meeting that day, and the other board says, no, we aren't going to be ready, then I guess you don't have a meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How staff feel about this, right? This was a big topic at our strategic planning. You didn't want more meetings, and you wanted the right to say, if you ask us to do more work, we're going to delay other things. It's hard. I know it's hard to decide to figure out what those other things are right now.
This is the top of the list, is it not? I mean, it really depends. I mean, if it's a meeting and it's an agenda and it's one item, one topic, doable. If it really is, as I look at it, it's what comes out of that meeting. Is it, hey, in the next 4 days, put together what a proposal would look like for the sharing of this department, and it's the first time we've had that conversation? Or is it something else? I don't know. But again, there's a finite amount of time between now and November 2nd.
Yeah.
And if you are interested, and for lack of a better word at this late hour, if you're interested in having the citizens know what they're potentially going to be voting on and what potentially the ramifications are, let's have the meeting. Try to get through November 2nd, then see where that goes after that. That's all, from a staff standpoint, we would like to know ultimately the direction from our boards and then do it. And uncertainty just leads to more uncertainty. So it's 3 more meetings amongst others, but we'll do what we can. And unfortunately, sometimes when people say, well, I checked the website and this isn't on there, or this link doesn't work, these are the things we don't get to. But what's the more important thing at this particular moment? giving you guys the information and them the information they need to make good decisions. Versus a link on a website or a update. I can't even tell you what. We
Right.
might, you know.
Right. I guess what I'm hearing is we should put them on the calendar, and in the prior meeting, the joint meeting prior, we needed to be clear what the agenda for the next meeting is,
And if we
and
as a
consider
board-
whether or not staff can support that next meeting, and we can have that discussion as the agenda is formed, rather than try to make a decision now that a meeting on October 26th is not needed. So, yeah. Pretty okay with that? Dawn's not happy, but
All right.
and it's
Not-
fine.
it's
It's
fine.
fine. Yeah. It's all right. So we don't need to vote on this, do we? We'll just
If the consensus is to add those three,
yeah.
I will be in attendance at, well,
Should I reach out to Andrew and say these are the stipulations, that the agenda for the next meeting has to be
Yes.
clearly stated in the prior meeting, and we'll have a discussion at that meeting as to whether or not staff can support it. So I'll do
Yes.
that. Talk to Andrew about that. Sure he's aware. They're meeting tomorrow, right?
Right.
So,
and then as many of you are aware, again, quick turnaround times. Packets go out on Friday for a Monday meeting. Well, they go out Friday for a Tuesday meeting. They go out on Fridays. We try very hard to get them out sooner, but they always tend to be on Friday. So we will make do. We will make do.
Okay, so I think we've got an answer there for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to
And
the.
you're contacting them tomorrow, sir?
I will. Yes, I will. I will probably not do it tonight, but I will.
If I could have a quick word, please.
I will email him in the morning. I think we're done with this agenda item, Andy.
Just quickly, okay? Town manager doesn't get to give his opinion. If he wants to have his opinion, then he needs to get up.
Andy, we're done with
sit in
this
front of
agenda item.
you tell the manager, okay, fine, man, I just won't vote for any of you. Okay, terms will expire, you become private citizen just like me.
So moving on to the next agenda item, we moved the minutes out of consent. So
I need to correct line 184 where it says Miss Hill Fleury congratulated Mr. Fleury for his award. I actually congratulated the Essex Cemetery Commission on their award from the state of Vermont.
all right, and I could find them as well. I had a change also that I'm hoping others can. Where is it? Line 121. I'm not going to change this because I actually did not verify it, so I don't want to make the change. So leave it alone. Leave it alone. All right. Any other changes? Or want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended, or minutes as amended.
Minutes as agended.
Minutes as amended. Sorry, it gets
All
past
right.
a certain
Thank you,
point. I
Tracy.
can't
Do I have a
speak.
second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Vince. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Did I say something wrong? Yeah. All right.
All right.
Minutes are approved. Last item is legal discussion on Village of Essex Junction, proposed separation from Town of Essex. We'll go into executive session at the end of the meeting to have that discussion in another room. Moving on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I second it.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Don. Any comments? This consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we approve the consent agenda. Reading file. Any board member comments? I just want to say thank you for including the human service funding thank you notes. It's good to let the public know that those went out and are appreciated. Anything else? All right, then we'll circle back to executive session. I guess before we do that, we're not going to come back. We're not likely to have any action, so we'll adjourn from where we stand at that point. Okay, so let's see. Somebody have the appropriate.
I do. I move that the select board make the specific finding that general public knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Tracy. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we have a second one?
Motion 2. I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body pursuant to 1 VSA 313 A1F to include the unified manager and deputy manager.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Tracy. Other comment, I assume. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move off to executive session. We won't come back to this meeting. We'll just adjourn from there because we have no expected actions. So,
Cheers too low to the ground.
good night, everybody. Thanks for attending.
I think
Good night, everyone at home.
Good night.
I'm trying to get it to go up. I go, I think I got to get out of the chair and make it go up. Anyway.
So Jordan,
That's all right.
great. So we lost.